Chapter 2737. This time, Rowling really wanted Chun Zhao to help with the investigation. She didn't want to trip him up or play dirty tricks. Yi Ziqing still couldn't believe Yu Keming's death. When she saw Yu Keming's photo, all her disdain and hatred for Yu Keming disappeared. Of course, Chun Zhao saw the photo too. Even he couldn't help but sigh. This guy really died a horrible death. Yu Keming's organs were smeared in a forbidden way into a horrifying scene. Yu Keming still had a smile on his face before he died. A few days had passed, and his body looked a bit swollen. After a short reunion with Fei Lai helplessly, Chun Zhao was forcefully taken away again. Of course, compared to Rowling's cold attitude last time, Chun Zhao's attitude was better this time. Perhaps it was because they'd been trapped in that special space together last time. So, Rowling felt that she and Chun Zhao were life and death friends. But to Chun Zhao, if Rowling had come out 2 days later, he probably would have forgotten about her. But to Chun Zhao, if Rowling had come out 2 days later, he probably would have forgotten about her. I didn't allow you to put your feet on the seat of my car. First of all, we're not friends. Second, even if we were, I wouldn't agree. Firstly, we're not friends. Secondly, even if we were friends, I wouldn't agree. Rowling didn't know what was in Chun Zhao's head. Was it more comfortable to sit cross-legged? Last time, he sat in the back seat. This time, he actually sat cross-legged in the front seat. What's wrong with you? I came to find you because I want to go to the crime scene with you and see if I can find any clues. Are you kidding? It's just a photo, and I almost peed my pants. You want me to go to the crime scene? Do you think I ate too much for lunch? Chun Zhao raised his voice by 3 octaves. To be honest, even if Chun Zhao wasn't afraid of bloody scenes, he still didn't want to go. Because the crime scene wasn't bloody. It was disgusting. Rowling didn't care if Chun Zhao agreed to it or not. Then, Chun Zhao regretted it. He realized that bloody and disgusting were 2 different things. He could already feel it when he looked at the photo. However, it was still within Chun Zhao's acceptable range. But after Rowling dragged him to the crime scene, Chun Zhao felt that he'd overestimated his limits. He was used to big scenes and thought that he could handle it. But when he saw Yu Keming and the environment, he vomited. Really, I don't care who did this. Chun Zhao only wanted to say that he had lost, although the body had been taken away by the police. But the layout of the scene was still the same. The stench still lingered in the air. Beauty, why did you drag me here? Now that I'm done being disgusted, can I go now? Show some respect. Policewoman? The people's police? Or a young lady? What do you want to call you? I'm not in the mood to joke with you. Well, Officer Comrade, why did you call me here? I don't think there's anything I can help you with. Spend the night here with me. Damn, are you kidding me? Did it have to be so exciting right from the start? I'm a man with a family. Rowling's face was still dark as she looked at Chun Zhao. I think this isn't normal. It's like the ghost that hit the wall that day. I told my colleagues, but they didn't believe me. Stop joking. Whether or not there are ghosts here, it's not a place for people to live. Look here. If it's not a haunted house, then it's a bathroom. And it hasn't been flushed in decades. You wanted to spend the night here? Are you trying to suffocate me to death? What, there's no ghost? We've wasted the night. Where's the ghost? Are we catching the ghost or delivering food? Have you thought it through? Rowling looked at him. I've investigated your recent whereabouts. You left some traces at Dragon Tiger Mountain. You even donated some money to the Taoist Association and became an honorary president. Did you run to Dragon Tiger Mountain to ask for help because of what happened that night? Did you get some ghost drawings from a Taoist? Or did you get a promise from a master that if you crush something when you're in danger, someone will appear to save you? What are you thinking? Chun Zhao rolled his eyes. If I can get help from a master just by donating money, I can donate so much that he'll run all over the place. Fine, fine. I know you're rich. Anyway, stay here with me tonight. Why should I? Then I'll take you back to the station. I won't lock you up for long. Just 24 hours. Do as you see fit. I have nothing to do with this. I know, but you had a conflict with him, after all. It's reasonable to lock you up for 24 hours. It's like letting the dead rest in peace. I think you won't object, right? I object. Why should I? Objection overruled. I really can't stay here for another second. If I do, I'll puke out last night's supper. Chun Zhao's face paled. I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? It's a matter of smell. It has nothing to do with courage. Do you have a cold? Or maybe you don't have a sense of smell at all. Rolling glanced at Qinzhao. Then she pulled open the corner of her shirt, revealing the gun holster on her waist. Fine, fine. You're awesome, okay? The entire building was temporarily locked down because of this vicious incident. There was no one in the entire building except for Qinzhao and Rolling. Qinzhao really couldn't breathe in the room, so he sat in the corridor outside the door. A while later, Rolling came out too. Seeing Qinzhao holding a bowl of instant noodles, she froze. Where did you get it? I saw that the neighbor's house wasn't closed, so I closed it for him. And then, when I was closing, I saw this bowl of noodles. I think it'll expire in another day. And then, I left $100. Is that why you didn't prepare a bowl for me? Without hesitation, Rolling commandeered the bowl of noodles in Qinzhao's hands. Then, Qinzhao picked up a bowl of noodles filled with sumptuous ingredients. Qinzhao ate a few mouthfuls and glanced at Rolling. I saw that their ingredients are almost spoiled. Also, I'll help them deal with the expired ones. If she wasn't hungry, Rolling really wanted to flip the bowl of instant noodles. The instant noodles, which were originally delicious, were now completely tasteless. Suddenly, Qinzhao felt some kind of spiritual fluctuation in the wall he was leaning against. It was like something had appeared. Qinzhao put down his bowl and chopsticks and glanced at Rolling beside him. Rolling glanced at him in surprise. What's wrong? Qinzhao thought for a moment and then shook his head. No, nothing. Whatever, that thing was too disgusting. I'll pretend I don't know. I'll spend the night in this corridor and run far away tomorrow. I'll run out of sorcery and never come back. Chapter 2738. Qinzhao felt that with him leading the team, he should be able to keep Rolling company for the night. Tomorrow, he would be able to wash his hands of this matter and wash his hands of it. As for what Rolling wanted to do after that had nothing to do with him. But things didn't go as he wished. Qinzhao wanted to have a peaceful night, but someone wasn't willing. The elevator suddenly opened with a ding. The person who came out froze. At the moment, Qinzhao and Rolling were sitting at the elevator door. They looked at each other awkwardly. A middle-aged man wearing a yellow Taoist robe walked out of the elevator. The man's yellow Taoist robe was very similar to the ones worn by charlatans in Hong Kong movies in the early 90s. The small mustache at the corner of his mouth made him look even more cunning. When the Taoist saw Qinzhao and Rolling, his first reaction was to take out his peachwood sword. He was about to cast a spell on the two. If you dare to use a spell, I'll stuff your head into the toilet, Qinzhao said telepathically to the Taoist. The Taoist was stunned. His eyes widened, and he stared at Qinzhao in shock. Instantly, he broke out in a cold sweat. Not everyone could use telepathic spells. It was basically an ability that only high-end cultivators had. And the man before him was clearly a high-end cultivator. After coming into contact with Qinzhao's murderous gaze, the Taoist froze on the spot. The Taoist priest froze on the spot, not knowing what to do for a moment. The Taoist wanted to turn and leave. But just then, Rolling suddenly took out her gun and aimed it at the Taoist. Don't move. Hands up. The Taoist glanced at Qinzhao and could only raise his hands helplessly. He was a third-rate Taoist cultivator. He couldn't block bullets. Also, Taoists weren't good at fighting. In particular, guns that were used against ordinary people were not their forte. Of course, under normal circumstances, at a distance of less than 2 meters, he could totally subdue Rolling before she could take out her gun. But now, Qinzhao stood beside Rolling. He didn't dare to move at all. Qinzhao could use telepathic spells and make such a threat. This was enough to prove that Qinzhao was definitely stronger than a dabbler like him. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. I'm on your side. The Taoist priest quickly raised his hands and said, Who's on the same side as you? Rolling said coldly, Who are you? Why are you here? In fact, Rolling had already treated him as a suspect, according to the plot that she had made up for herself. It was an evil Taoist priest who wanted to use some evil magic, and Yu Keming was killed by this evil Taoist priest. Then, he used Yu Keming's corpse to set up that evil and disgusting scene. In the end, he just happened to see it. I also have a police comrade friend. This time, I I was entrusted by him to come over and take a look at the situation. The Taoist priest quickly said, "A police friend?" Rolling frowned. She did not immediately accept the Taoist priest's explanation and still pointed the gun at the Taoist priest. "What's the name of your police friend? Which area is in charge of? What's the police number?" Rolling threw a few questions at him. "This is the place. His name is Wang Zhe." "Leader?" Rolling was surprised, but his words didn't dispel her suspicions. "Look at him." Rolling held the gun in one hand and took out the phone with the other. "Leader, I met a sneaky Taoist priest. He said that he was entrusted by you. Is that true? You met that old liar?" "Old liar? What happened?" "He's a liar? He's in our area. He has a fortune-telling stall on Hualin Road. A few years ago, the city enforcement officers raided his stall. Then, when I passed by, I kicked the city enforcement officer. That old liar left me his business card and said that I can find him if I need anything. In recent years, he's helped me solve some problems." "He really knows magic?" "I don't know if he knows magic, but this old liar has some connections." The old liar looked at Rolling. "How about it? I didn't lie to you, did I?" Only then did Rolling put down her gun. Although she still had some doubts, at least she no longer treated the old liar as a suspect. It wasn't because she trusted the old liar. It was because she trusted her leader. "Why are you here?" "Leader Wang Zhe told me to take a look. Maybe I can find some clues here and help him solve the case." Rolling didn't think that her captain would tell her not to believe in any supernatural powers or gods. In the end, she'd actually hired a charlatan to take a look. "Then why did you take out the Peachwood sword when you saw us, just now?" "I thought you were dirty things." Rolling's face darkened. The old liar looked at Chun Zhao carefully. He realized that Chun Zhao was looking at him with a smile. His gaze was really uncomfortable. A smiling tiger. The old liar thought to himself. "You're the dirty thing," Rolling said angrily. Yes, I'm dirty, okay?" The old liar had been on the streets for decades. He wasn't afraid of honor or disgrace. Rolling's angry words didn't even tickle him. "Can you really tell what kind of spell it is?" Rolling asked in a serious tone. The old liar glanced at Chen Zhao and thought, "Can't you just have the one beside you? Why do you have to trouble me?" The old liar didn't mind being ordered around by a police comrade. Because Chun Zhao was a regular person, he could find some sense of superiority as a cultivator. But acting like a big shot in front of an expert, then he wouldn't be able to handle it. It would be fine if Chun Zhao pretended to be stable. If he was slightly out of sorts, if he did that, he would lose all his face. We're just trying to make a living. Why do you have to be so direct?" "Huh." The old liar decided to back out. He didn't want to follow Rolling's intentions. In any case, there was already an expert here to hold the fort. If he interfered, it would be breaking the rules. Plus, Chen Zhao was stronger than him. There was no need for him to stay and accumulate hatred. Maybe that brat's purpose was to leave a favorable impression in front of the policewoman and then chase after her. If he stayed, he might be targeted by Chun Zhao. Don't tell me you charlatans have some rule that you can't answer directly in front of regular people. If that's the case, I know the rules and I won't go around announcing it. Since you can work with our leader, you shouldn't mind working with me, right? The old liar glanced at Chun Zhao. He thought, isn't this girl's brain a little developed? Although part of her speculation was correct. Actually, no one would care about that rule. As long as one didn't go to the TV station to perform, no one would care. Work together? You're thinking too much. I don't have a working relationship with your leader. Chapter 2739. The old liar emphasized again that he and Rolling's captain, Wang Zhe, were sworn enemies. No, sworn friends. Anyway, the old liar didn't want to work with Rolling. But just then, a head popped out of the door of Yu Kemming's apartment beside Rolling. It was a bloody head. The place where the door of the rental house came into contact with the bloody skull had been corroded and turned black. When the old liar saw the head, he couldn't help but be terrified. He took a few steps back and sat on the ground. Blood demon. Rolling was so frightened that she pulled out her gun. Bang, bang. Rolling's 2 shots hit the head directly. Blood splattered out from the temples of the flesh head. But it didn't die. It wasn't even injured. The bullet slowly seeped out of its face and fell to the ground. The head turned and looked at Rolling. then shot a mouthful of bloody phlegm at her. Rolling suddenly felt her body being pulled by a huge force. She was flung 2 meters away. Looking back, she realized that Chun Zhao had pulled her over. "What are you doing?" Chun Zhao lifted his hand and pointed at the wall beside him. The bloody phlegm that the head had spat out earlier had already left a horrifying hole in the wall. "You should thank me," Chun Zhao said. By then, the old liar had also come back to his senses. He quickly jumped up and stabbed the peachwood sword into the head's neck, which was still unable to move. Borrowing the power of the 5 mountains, 9 revolutions, lightning. A bolt of lightning suddenly flashed across the old liar's peachwood sword. But the head wasn't injured at all. Instead, it turned at an unbelievable angle and looked at the old liar above. Then, the peachwood sword that had stabbed into the head started to corrode. The rot kept spreading upwards. The old liar hurriedly let go of the peachwood sword. "Hurry up and purify it!" Rolling screamed in fear. Purification is something that foreigners do. If I want to do something, I can only do it to eliminate demons and protect the Tao. The old liar corrected. Then hurry up and eliminate demons and protect the Tao. Actually, regardless of whether it was domestic or foreign, purification or elimination, the process was similar. Basically, everyone's techniques were more or less the same. If they could get rid of the unclean things and leave behind a pure spirit body with no negative side effects, that would be considered purification. As for those who couldn't withstand it, that would be hopeless. That would be worth it to get rid of demons and defend the Tao. To put it simply, those who died would be slaying demons, while those who lived would be purified. Of course, most of the time, they only face spiritual bodies. However, they were now facing a true demon. "Get rid of my ass, this thing can't be killed." "Motherfucker, which lunatic came up with this thing?" The old swindler cursed. Although the old swindler's means were not high, his vision was not low. In the spirit world, as long as one had a demon with them, there was basically nothing good. Turning around and leaving was a normal option. If he couldn't leave, he would hide. This was the backup option. Of course, there were always high-end people who developed some spells. It was specifically used to carry out the true exorcism. However, for the time being, blood demons belonged to the category that couldn't be destroyed. There was really no way to destroy this thing. The only thing that worked was the seal. "Can't you kill this thing? This thing is truly immortal. Hurry up and run." The old swindler was already planning to retreat. However, he still reminded Rolling to retreat out of professional ethics. Just then, black spots of erosion started appearing on the door of the rental house. Then, the blood demon's limbs appeared through the spots. After enduring the pressure that it shouldn't have, the door finally collapsed. Everyone finally saw the blood demon's true appearance. It was a thing that only maintained its human form with its head. Its limbs were completely pieced together. Even Picasso couldn't imagine such a twisted and weird thing. 5 limbs of different lengths were distributed in different positions. There was no symmetry at all. Its movements were also slightly awkward. Blood Demon looked at the old swindler and then at Rolling. Finally, it looked at Chun Zhao. "It's you." He, Blood Demon, suddenly revealed a horrifying smile. Chun Zhao scratched his head. "You recognize me?" If Blood Demon hadn't said this, Chun Zhao wouldn't have noticed this bloody face. "It seemed to be you coming. You snatched Ziqing. You stole my girlfriend. Do you think you can do whatever you want with money?" Blood Demon growled with a hideous expression. "Ah, it's you." Chun Zhao shrugged, indicating that he'd just recognized him. "You're the one who lives off a woman and isn't professional at all, right?" Rolling and the old swindler broke out in a cold sweat. Didn't this guy see what state Blood Demon was in? Did he want to die faster? Did he have to anger Blood Demon? "I'm going to kill you." As expected, Blood Demon was triggered by Chun Zhao's words. Just as Blood Demon pounced over, Chun Zhao suddenly grabbed the broom beside him. The broomstick stabbed into Blood Demon's mouth and nailed him to the wall. Even the old swindler was dumbfounded, not to mention Rolling. Of course, the Blood Demon could even corrode a refined peachwood sword, not to mention the broomstick. But one had to admit that Chun Zhao's move was very cruel. He, You don't think you can kill it like this? Poof! Before the blood demon could finish, Chun Zhao suddenly swung his tail and kicked the blood demon's head away. Rolling stared at Chun Zhao in shock. In her impression, Chun Zhao was a rich person. He lived like a prince and was used to enjoying life. Plus, Chun Zhao had shown last time that he was overcautious and cowardly. So, she didn't think that Chun Zhao would dare to attack such a terrifying blood demon. In the end, who would have thought that Chun Zhao would not only use his hands, but also his feet? Furthermore, it was such a ferocious sweep. He kicked Blood Demon's head off and sent it flying. After the blood-colored head flew out, it evaporated in the air. Then, an even more twisted head grew out from Blood Demon's broken neck. Let me finish what I have to say. Blood Demon wasn't afraid of Chun Zhao at all. Moreover, he didn't allow Chun Zhao to be angry at him. Chun Zhao didn't even let him finish. Blood Demon's cheeks puffed up, and he was about to spit blood at Chun Zhao. But this mouthful of bloody phlegm was still brewing. His chin was hit hard by Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao's kick almost broke the blood demon's neck. You can't. Even if you become like this, you won't have a chance to take revenge, Chun Zhao said casually. If you can't kill me, you can only wait for death. It's just a matter of time. Chapter 2740. The blood demon was very cowardly. At least, most people and he thought so. Of course, Chun Zhao wasn't scared at all. If Chun Zhao could be defeated so easily, his enemies would probably create hundreds of blood demons and throw them at Chun Zhao. The only advantage the blood demon had before Chun Zhao was that it was disgusting. Rolling and the old liar were both stunned. They suddenly realized something. It was said to be a very powerful blood demon. It didn't seem like much. Chun Zhao kicked the blood demon's shoulder. The blood demon was kicked into the apartment directly. Then, Chun Zhao followed. Rolling heard banging noises in the room. Chun Zhao seemed to be dismantling the house. She craned her neck and looked inside. Rolling saw Chun Zhao stabbing a chair leg into the blood demon's back. Yo, looks like your flesh can't corrode stainless steel. Chun Zhao chuckled at the blood demon. Let me go. I'll kill you. The blood demon roared in anger. Chun Zhao turned his head and looked at Rolling. Do you have the phone number of a secret department that deals with these things? For example, a special operation team. Rolling was dumbfounded. Before this, she didn't believe that there were supernatural things in the world. Where did he get the phone number of a secret department? No. Do you have one? Chun Zhao looked at the old liar. No. You're in the industry. How can you not have one? Then do you have the phone number of the police station chief? I do, Rolling answered. You can't kill me. It's time for you to die. The blood demon wanted to twist his body, but his body was locked by 4 stainless steel chair legs. Chun Zhao was still sitting in the chair. This made it impossible for the blood demon to move his twisted body. Let's try and see if there's a way to kill him, the old liar suggested. What idea do you have? Usually, unclean things are afraid of fire. Let's try a fire attack first, the old liar said. Rolling looked forward to the old liar's fire spell with interest. But she was soon disappointed. The old liar actually took out a gas can from the kitchen. Then he used the gas pipe to make a simple flamethrower. The blood demon howled, but the flamethrower didn't do much damage to him. When the flame sprayed on his skin would also be scorched black. However, it would quickly shed its skin and replace it with a new layer of skin. Let's try something else, Chun Zhao said. The smell is disgusting. Rolling and old liar covered their noses and tacitly stopped trying. Old liar, is there any other way? The old swindler took out several dozen different talismans from his body. This is the Shadow Thunder incantation. Give it a try. The old swindler picked out one of the many talismans. A black thunderbolt burst out from the burnt talisman and struck the blood devil. The blood demon howled, but just like before, the wound quickly healed. Looks like it's useless. Let's try again. It's useless again, the dirty water technique. It's ineffective. Wood burial. Ineffective, ineffective, ineffective. Gradually, the old liar's forehead started to sweat. Could it be that this blood demon really couldn't be destroyed? Devil, aged metal destruction. The old swindler's last talisman shot out a dark golden sword light. Ah! The blood devil let out a miserable shriek. His shoulder was pierced, but the healing speed was extremely slow. Huh. Devil aged metal destruction seems to work. He can still heal, but it's clearly much slower than before, the old swindler said in shock. It's probably because his resistance to metal spells isn't high, Chun Zhao said. Seeing that his flesh can't corrode stainless steel, we can more or less come to a conclusion. That shouldn't be the case. In the past, people tried to stab the blood demon with swords, but it didn't work. It's not that it didn't work. It's probably because his flesh and blood corroded a regular demon vanquishing sword, Chun Zhao speculated. In other words, if the demon vanquishing sword is coated with a layer of steel film, it can deal effective damage to it? I think so. Let me go. Let me go. I won't take revenge. I won't take revenge. Seeing that its weakness had been found, the blood demon immediately backed down. But just then, the old swindler suddenly let out a miserable shriek. A golden sword light pierced through the old swindler's shoulder. Chun Zhao and Rolling looked up. A stranger had appeared at the door. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to show myself, but now you want to get rid of the blood demon that I painstakingly created, so I have to show myself. It's all your fault, the stranger muttered to himself. The stranger muttered to himself. You don't know how much effort it takes to create a blood demon. Just the candidate alone is 1 in a million. Furthermore, he has to cooperate with me. Otherwise, it would be difficult to successfully create one. In the past 20 years, I've only been able to create 5. Rolling immediately pointed her gun at the stranger. Judging from his tone, he was the one who created the blood demon. In other words, he was the murder suspect. At the same time, he was the culprit behind all this. The stranger who had suddenly appeared wore a long robe and had a bald head. He didn't look old, but Chun Zhao felt that his life force had dried up. He was like an old man with a weak body. Of course, it was common for some cultivators to use evil spells to maintain their own life force through other people's life force. Chun Zhao had met quite a few cultivators like this. There were quite a few in foreign countries. But what Chun Zhao really cared about was that the stranger had actually evaded Chun Zhao's senses before appearing. To Chun Zhao, this was the most unbelievable thing. The stranger really couldn't be considered strong. At the very least, Chun Zhao had figured out most of the stranger's background with just one glance. However, Chun Zhao wasn't familiar with the Huaxia's spiritual world. Thus, he couldn't tell the stranger's background. But the old liar's expression instantly turned to panic. This panic wasn't just because the stranger had injured him with a sneak attack. It was also because he'd guessed the stranger's background. Taoist blood. How come it's you? How dare you step in a Huaxia? Oh, isn't this the ancient Taoist priest of the river? Chun Zhao and Rolling couldn't help but glance at the old liar. Ancient Taoist priest? Ancient Taoist priest? It sounded like there was some truth to this title. The old liar stood up with difficulty. Murderous intent appeared in Taoist blood's eyes. The old liar knew his identity. This time, he'd secretly returned to Huaxia. If his identity was exposed, then he definitely wouldn't have the chance to escape like before. So the old liar had to die. The old Taoist priest naturally knew Taoist blood's true identity. He was a demon who'd wreaked havoc more than a decade ago. Everyone in the Huaxia spiritual world wanted to kill him. Chun Zhao recognized the stranger's identity. The stranger would definitely kill the 3 of them to silence them. Thus, in this battle, he couldn't pretend to be a third-rate charlatan anymore. The old liar glanced at Chun Zhao out of the corner of his eye. Kid, this demon has an extraordinary background. Don't pretend to be a normal person. If you keep hiding, all 3 of us will die here. Chapter 2741. Rolling looked at him in disbelief. You too. Chun Zhao chuckled and didn't meet Rolling's gaze. He didn't respond to her. The blood demon wasn't much trouble for Chun Zhao, even if they used ordinary people or slightly more extreme methods. Chun Zhao could solve it without raising Rolling's suspicions. But then came the blood ancestor Taoists. Chun Zhao probably wouldn't be able to deal with it like a normal person. Blood ancestor Dallas also looked at Chun Zhao. You're You're also a cultivator? I couldn't tell, but your blood energy is shockingly thick. If you are willing to cooperate with me, I can give you even greater power, Dallas Blood said nonchalantly. I turned into this thing, Chun Zhao said, pointing at the blood demon. It's even more advanced than this, Blood Ancestor Dallas said. Then you need to let me weigh the pros and cons first, don't you think? Is my name not enough? Sorry, I just came back from abroad, Chun Zhao said, shrugging and smiling. I'm not familiar with the local environment. In fact, it wasn't that Chun Zhao wasn't familiar with the supernatural world. He just knew nothing about it. Therefore, he had no idea who the Dallas Blood Ancestor was. The old swindler had the urge to vomit blood. In fact, he'd had some hope for Chun Zhao. After all, Chun Zhao could talk to them telepathically. This was a very high-level spell. But when they heard that Chun Zhao had returned from abroad, they were all shocked. His mood instantly fell to the bottom of the valley. This was considered regional discrimination. Domestic spirit world cultivators had always held a lofty attitude toward foreign spirit world cultivators. However, this was also within reason. In most cases, when they were at the same cultivation level, domestic cultivators would beat foreign spiritualists. These were all standard operations. They heard that Chun Zhao had come back from abroad. The old liar first deducted 30% of Chun Zhao's strength. This blood ancestor Dallas was involved in a major event 20 years ago. Oh, did he have a brilliant record in that incident? This wasn't the first time Chun Zhao had heard people mention the big event from 20 years ago. That would be a major event in the entire world. It was also a glorious era in which all the spiritualists in the world of the supernatural world cast aside their differences and fought together. Yes, it was indeed glorious. However, it was not in the battle against the peerless great demon and his army of demons and devils. Instead, it was in the matter of plotting against other cultivators. While everyone was busy fighting against the peerless great demon, he ambushed other cultivators from behind. Over 200 cultivators were ambushed by him, and many of their souls were plundered by him. It was also because of that incident that his reputation in the supernatural world became unbearably bad. Blood Ancestor Dallas smiled. He was not angered by the old liar's derogatory words when introducing him. He was more concerned about the outcome of the match, the winner taking all. Naturally, it also included the right to speak. It was as if he had pressed the button and he had lost. Therefore, what he had done was exposed. In fact, there were many people who were worse than him in the past. It was just that they had done it more discreetly. Regardless of time, race. There was never a shortage of traitors. You don't seem to have told me that I once defeated 12 grand cultivators on my own in a battle. The old liar's expression turned even uglier. He had purposely not said it. He was afraid of scaring Chun Zhao away. They were already at a disadvantage. Once Chun Zhao lost the courage to fight, he would only be defeated by Blood Ancestor Dallas one by one. No, with Blood Ancestor Dallas' strength. He didn't even need to defeat them one by one. The old liar was one of the 12 grand cultivators that Blood Ancestor Dallas had defeated in that battle. In that battle, Blood Ancestor Dallas had killed 8 people. 2 were heavily injured, 1 was completely crippled, and 1 was the old liar himself. Although the old liar's cultivation hadn't been crippled, his power had been greatly reduced. He had once been a first-rate grand cultivator, but now he only had first-rate vision. He had once stood at the peak of the supernatural world in Huaxia, but now he only had 1/10 or 2/10 of his cultivation left. For anyone who had once stood at the peak, it would not feel good to fall from the pedestal. This was also why the old liar had only been living as a charlatan all these years. Their only advantage now was that they were in the city. Even Blood Ancestor Dallas didn't dare to cause too much of a commotion here. His appearance in Huaxia this time was probably sneaky as well. No matter how arrogant Blood Ancestor Dallas was, he wouldn't dare to swagger around in Huaxia. Blood Ancestor Dallas, you may be skilled, but this is Huaxia. If you fight with us here, I'm afraid you won't even be able to walk out of this block before you'll be surrounded by cultivators from all directions. Don't try to scare me. What commotion can I cause against you guys? You think too highly of yourself. Although Blood Ancestor Dallas said that he didn't care, he was actually quite cautious. He was a Huaxia cultivator himself, so he naturally knew how vast the supernatural world was. Blood Ancestor Daolis didn't plan on waiting any longer, lest something unexpected happened. Blood Ancestor Daolis quickly formed seals with his hands. A scarlet mist emanated from his body. Huh, this is a spell from Dragon Tiger Mountain, right? Chen Zhao tilted his head and looked at Blood Ancestor Daolis' spell in confusion. How is that possible? That's the blood refinement magic. Old Liar said. Blood Ancestor Daolis created it himself. Chen Zhao frowned at Blood Ancestor Daolis. Why did this blood refinement magic look so much like Dragon Tiger Mountain's Heaven Master Sect's Heliocosm Return to One Divine Art? Chen Zhao had read through all of Dragon Tiger Mountain's top secret books, including private collections and ancient treasures. He didn't let go of any of them. Most of them didn't leave any impression, but Heliocosm Return to One Divine Art was one of the few that left a deep impression on Chen Zhao. This was because this technique could allow one to cultivate divine powers. What was a divine power? In more conventional terms, it was called a superpower. There were usually two ways to obtain divine powers. One was born through bloodline inheritance. When one awakened magic power, they would also awaken divine powers. The other was a sudden epiphany during cultivation. The probability of this was relatively low. There wasn't a clear pattern. Anyway, it was very random. It was possible to suddenly comprehend a divine power under any circumstances. However, one thing was certain. Divine powers were very practical in battle. There were even some highly compatible divine abilities that could double one's cultivation and combat strength. However, this divine ability wasn't something that just anyone could possess. If one's reincarnation technique wasn't good enough, one could only rely on luck. However, the probability of awakening divine powers was similar to winning the lottery. It was possible to think about it, but not everyone had the luck to win the lottery. Heliocosm Return to One Divine Art could increase the probability. It could increase to about 1%. From 1 in a few million to 1% was already a huge increase. Of course, Chen Zhao had also thought that if he was lucky, he might be able to win once. However, to Chen Zhao, the 1% chance was still not enough. Because of this, Chen Zhao had a deep impression of this technique. Chapter 2742. The Daoist Blood Ancestors cultivation technique was very similar to the Heliocosm Return to One Divine Art, but they were also different. Of course, the old liar didn't believe him. The Daoist Blood Ancestor was a heretical sect, while Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master Sect was a righteous sect. The two were completely unrelated. How could the Daoist Blood Ancestor use a cultivation technique from the Dragon Tiger Mountain's Heavenly Master Sect? But Daoist narrowed his eyes at Chen Zhao. You actually recognize my cultivation technique. Are you a disciple of Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master Sect? If I say yes, will you let me go? Chen Zhao chuckled as he looked at Blood Ancestor Daolis. Blood Ancestor Daolis laughed too, but then he suddenly pointed at Chen Zhao. Blood boil. The next moment, a blood-colored mist suddenly enveloped Chen Zhao. At the same time, the temperature of the blood-colored mist rose to more than 1,000 degrees. Even at a distance of 2 meters, Old Liar and Rolling could feel the scorching hot steam. The two stared at Chen Zhao, who was enveloped in shock. I'm sorry, Chen Zhao, who was enveloped in the blood-red mist, suddenly asked. Apart from the sauna, do you have any other uses? Then, the blood-colored mist dispersed. However, the scattered mist once again gathered around Blood Ancestor Daolis. You don't look like a little Taoist. Blood Ancestor Daolis looked at Chen Zhao in confusion. A normal Taoist priest wouldn't be able to block his attack, even if he was from Dragon Tiger Mountain's Celestial Master Sect. You seem to be mistaken about something. I am not a Taoist priest, nor am I a disciple of the Celestial Master Sect of Longhu Mountain. Impossible. Since you can recognize the boundless convergence divine art, then you can only be a disciple of the Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master Sect. I just went to the library of the Celestial Master Sect on Mount Longhu a few days ago. Do you think I'll believe that? Ask the old man beside you if he believes it or not. Even the old liar didn't believe Chun Zhao, let alone the blood ancestor. What kind of place was the celestial master sect of Longhu Mountain? You, an outsider, want to go to the library of Mount Longhu? Do you think celestial master Zhang is a pushover? That fellow would not be happy without meat for 3 meals a day. That guy didn't hesitate to eat people. The title of #1 in the world was not just for show. Blood ancestor Dallas considered himself a ruthless person. But in front of Zhang Tianyi, he still had to cower. Therefore, he did not believe that an outsider could stroll around the library of the Celestial Master sect on Longhu Mountain. It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. You just need to know that I'm very rich. I'm so rich that Zhang Tianyi wouldn't be angry even if I threw money at his face. Hee, you're the first person who dares to say such things about Zhang Tianyi. If I told you that Zhang Tianyi would be afraid of me, would you believe me? The look in blood ancestor Dallas' eyes was enough to explain his answer. I don't believe it. Blood ancestor Dallas hated Zhang Tianyi to the core. But there was one thing he had to admit. Zhang Tianyi, that old thing, he was really strong. He was a little too strong, even if he had been hiding abroad for 20 years. His cultivation was several times stronger than it was 20 years ago, but he still didn't have the confidence to face Zhang Tianyi. No, it was not just lack of confidence. He knew very well that he would only die if he faced Zhang Tianyi. No matter who you are, no matter what your identity is, no one can save you now. Not even Zhang Tianyi. If that old guy knows that he can save me one day, he'll probably wake up laughing even in his dreams. Even if what you said is true, he won't have the chance to wake up laughing because he'll never have the chance. Blood ancestor Dallas' right arm suddenly seemed to turn into liquid. More accurately, it seemed to have become an arm made of blood. It was a tangible liquid. Blood ancestor Dallas suddenly swung at Chun Zhao. The bloody arm did not dissipate. Blood ancestor Dallas was extremely confident in his methods. This blood poison hand, as long as it came into contact with a drop of blood, it would immediately poison the other party. Blood poison was similar to corpse poison. As long as someone touched the skin, it would seep in. Blood poison would make the poisoned person's blood boil. Unlike the blood-colored mist from before, which only burned the enemy's skin, the blood poison would make the poisoned person's blood boil. The blood poison would directly affect the enemy's body, making the enemy's blood boil. Basically, no one could withstand this kind of boiling. The blood poison hand landed on Chun Zhao easily. After seeing Chun Zhao's skin turn red, the red color seeped in. Blood ancestor Dallas couldn't help but smile. As for the other old liar, that would be even easier. He was well aware of the old liar's injuries. Back then, he didn't hold back at all. It was a miracle that the old liar survived. Being able to leave behind 1/10 of his peak cultivation was already not bad. Chun Zhao's skin slowly turned red. It was like a rash. Chun Zhao looked at his hands. Soon, the redness faded. What kind of attack is this? Poison attack? Or a spell? Chun Zhao asked curiously. The blood ancestor's pupils constricted as he looked at Chun Zhao. How could this be? Why didn't the blood poison work? You're a little weird. Dallas stared at him. If you tell me the secret of how you cured the blood poison, I can consider letting you live. Chun Zhao chuckled. Instead of thinking about letting me live, you should consider using your half-step Shangqing realm cultivation to fight with all your might. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. Dallas Blood's expression changed drastically. How did you know? Could the enemy see through his cultivation? How is that possible? Chun Zhao grinned. Generally speaking, very few people can get close to me without me sensing them. However, I didn't notice you even when you showed yourself. Either you're extremely good at hiding, but after seeing your methods with my own eyes, I can confirm that your hiding methods are rather ordinary. So I can only suspect that you have a small world. I can feel some traces of a small world on you. It's very similar to what I felt when I was half a step away from the Shangqing state. It's both that faintly discernible aura. Dallas Blood's expression finally turned serious. He was even a little panicked. That's impossible, right? This man who didn't even look 30 was a Shangqing realm cultivator? How is that possible? Since when was Shang-Qing realm so worthless? The old liar was confused. After all, he didn't have a strong background. He didn't have any powerful inheritance, so he'd never heard of Shang-Qing realm. But from Chun Zhao's words, it sounded like something incredible. As for Rolling, she was even more confused. After all, she was a true outsider. The conversation between Chun Zhao, the old liar, and Dallas Blood was like heaven to her. Chapter 2743. Dallas Blood's expression was cold, but his eyes became serious. You don't have to bluff, Dallas Blood analyzed calmly. If you're really half a step into the Shang-Qing realm, or even the Shang-Qing realm, there's no way your name doesn't exist in the spiritual world. Moreover, there's no precedent of someone reaching the Shang-Qing realm at your age. He wasn't sure if Chun Zhao was bluffing or not. He was just guessing. At the same time, he was boosting his confidence. Chun Zhao didn't attack, but he was indeed a bit too strong. Dallas Blood's 2 killing moves were completely ineffective against Chun Zhao. However, Dallas Blood planned to use his trump card now. Small world. This was something he'd comprehended from a different path, although it was still quite superficial. This powerful change wasn't just limited to the strength of his dermic powers. It was the strength of all aspects. The feeling of controlling the world in his hands brought him unprecedented pleasure. Instead, it was the feeling of being powerful in all aspects. The feeling of having the world in his hands brought him an unprecedented pleasure. It was the strength of all aspects. The feeling of controlling the world in his hands brought him unprecedented pleasure. He believed that he could easily suppress the 12 great cultivators with just one hand. A trail of blood began to form beneath Dallas Blood's feet. Chun Zhao knew that this was Dallas Blood's spell. Chun Zhao knew that this was the Blood Ancestor's spell. This scene was really similar to a woman's monthly visit. Dallas Blood looked at Chun Zhao coldly. He was angry at Chun Zhao's blabbering, but he believed that Chun Zhao wouldn't be able to laugh very soon. More and more blood appeared under Dallas Blood's feet. More and more blood appeared under Dallas Blood's feet. From the pool of blood, blood demons began to emerge one after another. 8 blood demons appeared from the front and back. 9 transformations blood demon art. The old liar's expression changed instantly. But Chun Zhao felt something else. These 8 blood demons seemed to be one with Dallas Blood. They didn't seem like monsters, but more like a part of Dallas Blood. This feeling, it was as if these 8 blood demons were Dallas Blood's small world. That's right, it was a small world. Dallas Blood had used this method to successfully reach half a step into the Shang-Qing realm. Chun Zhao wasn't unfamiliar with such a small world. When he was half a step into the Shang-Qing realm, Kong Mosa used the same method against his first opponent of the same level. Kong Mosa used his devil army as his own little world, and his power was connected with the devil army. As long as he didn't destroy his demon army, he would have endless power, and his demon army could pollute the entire area, turning the entire contaminated area into a part of Kans Mosa. Blood Ancestor Dallas, on the other hand, used the Blood Devil as his own little world. It seemed that Blood Ancestor Dallas' small world was much smaller than Kong Mosa's. In fact, at their level, the size of the pocket world did not affect it much. Moreover, Blood Ancestor Dallas' 8 blood demons were probably no weaker than Kong Mosa's demon army. However, it seemed that his little world wasn't perfect. Chun Zhao glanced at the blood demon that Yu Qiming had transformed into. Was it because they were still missing one? This was indeed a clever way of doing things. If he was allowed to refine the 9th blood demon into his little world, he would definitely be able to refine it. He should be able to truly enter the Shang-Qing realm. Although it was a trick, there was no doubt about his strength. At least no one below the Shang-Qing realm could defeat him. The old liar broke out in a cold sweat. At the moment, Blood Ancestor Dallas was in his eyes. He was no longer just terrifying. He had practically become a demon with boundless magic power. That suffocating aura seemed to have solidified the surrounding air. Blood Ancestor Dallas' confidence also increased with the appearance of the 8 blood demons. He was still unfamiliar with this new realm, But when this power spread throughout his body and mind were changing. Endless power brought endless pleasure and indescribable confidence. The world was under his control. It even gave him an illusion. Even if Zhang Tianyi stood in front of him, he could still fight him. Perhaps this was the origin of the saying, dark 30% stronger and 30% dumber. Huh. Blood Ancestor Dallas suddenly roared. In an instant, a huge amount of blood chi turned into a terrifying blood-colored demon behind Blood Ancestor Dallas. Although the blood-colored demon only had a head, it was already emitting a terrifying aura. Kneel! Blood Ancestor Dallas snorted. He had only been halfway to the Shangqing realm for less than half a year, but he had already used it 4 times. Every time, his opponents would collapse physically and mentally the moment he activated his little world. This time, he had a deeper understanding of the little world. He believed that his opponent this time would be no exception. Rolling could no longer stand and fell to the ground. The old liar was slightly better, but only slightly. His legs were trembling, and he couldn't attack with the peachwood sword at all. The only use of the sword in his hand was to give him some psychological comfort. But he knew that the peachwood sword was completely meaningless. Blood Ancestor Dallas' terrifying strength had already exceeded his previous understanding of him. What kind of old monster was this? Was there no one else in the world who could control this old monster? Not enough. You don't even have the ability to escape. Chun Zhao calmly waved his finger. Oomph. The moment Blood Ancestor Dallas snorted, an even more terrifying pressure rushed toward Chun Zhao. The wall behind Chun Zhao also crumbled under the immense pressure. I told you. Chun Zhao raised his right arm and suddenly pinched the air. Not enough. Bang! In an instant, all the bloody light and the blood-colored monster formed by Blood Ancestor Dallas blood chi were crushed. Blood dyed the walls, ceiling, and floor of the room red. The old liar and Blood Ancestor Dallas pupils contracted. How is this possible? Blood Ancestor Dallas looked at Chun Zhao in shock. How'd he do it? Blood Ancestor Dallas knew very well how powerful he was. But how'd he do it? Why did he shatter his blood god Dharma idol when he didn't feel anything? I want to see more spells that make me feel fresh, Chun Zhao said indifferently. If you can't satisfy my curiosity, then you'll die even faster. Blood Ancestor Dallas had been unbridled and arrogant a moment ago, but now he was frowning deeply. Chun Zhao didn't release his own aura, but even so, Dallas still felt the pressure. Even though Chun Zhao was hiding his strength and aura, he could directly destroy his blood god Dharma. Just this move alone was enough for him to be cautious. Die! Blood Ancestor Dallas' body trembled slightly. The blood on the walls instantly turned into countless blood thorns that shot toward Chun Zhao. Chapter 2744. Chun Zhao's pupils suddenly turned red. A red ripple suddenly spread out from Chun Zhao's body. The red ripple wasn't very eye-catching, but it was impossible to ignore. When the red ripple spread out, Old Liar and Rolling didn't feel anything strange. When it touched them, it was only a little warm. That was all. But the moment the red ripple touched the blood thorns, they evaporated. Dallas' blood didn't even have many places to hide. The moment the red ripple swept past, his skin was carbonized. Dallas' blood fell to the ground in pain. He had already forgotten when was the last time he'd been so heavily injured. Was it the great battle 20 years ago? That battle had indeed injured him to the brink of death. But it definitely hadn't been as pathetic as today. The kid in front of him was young, but his strength was terrifying. Rolling and Old Liar's expressions also froze. They didn't understand why the red ripple didn't hurt them at all when it touched them. But when it touched Dallas' blood, it would cause such damage. Dallas' blood's expression changed. He painstakingly healed the burns on his body and pressed his palms against the ground. In an instant, the color of blood spread out. Then, the inside and outside of the room turned red. Even the window was swallowed by the red. It was like the end of the world. At this moment, Old Liar and Rolling were no different. They didn't know what was happening before them at all. Chun Zhao was as calm as ever. An alternate space? Chun Zhao didn't expect Taoist blood to have developed his own alternate space when he was half a step into the Shangqing realm. It also seemed that this wasn't a simple alternate space. The place was filled with a thick blood aura, as if it had been washed by a sea of blood. Chun Zhao looked at Taoist blood in surprise. This guy's cultivation wasn't high, but the scale and complexity of this alternate space far exceeded his level. This alternate space was second only to the wasteland market that imitated the layout of Istanbul when Chun Zhao was in Istanbul last time. This alternate space definitely wasn't created and set up by Taoist blood himself. At least, even Chun Zhao couldn't make such a huge and complicated alternate space. You're dead. Blood ancestor Wu Dao's eyes were filled with determination. Around Chun Zhao, apart from the room they were in, the entire building and even the entire street had disappeared. They were now in a private space. In this private space, once one's magic power was exhausted, without the owner's permission, one would not even be able to recover one's magic power by inhaling and exhaling spiritual energy. Of course, this kind of space could not trap a Shangqing realm master. Even a Shangqing realm cultivator would not be able to recover his mana here. However, a Shangqing realm expert could break through the alternate dimension and escape. So, Chun Zhao looked at Taoist in confusion. You want to trap me with this space? I know you're an expert in the Shangqing realm, but this is the land of the blood god. No one can escape from here, not even Zhang Tianyi. Blood ancestor Wu Dao was very confident about this. Chun Zhao sensed a tremendous amount of blood qi in the center of this place. It was so tremendous that even he could not catch up to it. A confident smile appeared on blood ancestor Wu Dao's face. This wasn't any other place. Outside, he was still half a step into the Shangqing realm. But here, he was a true Shangqing realm cultivator, and a top Shangqing realm cultivator. Here, he was a god, a true god. Suddenly, Chun Zhao felt the huge mass of blood qi in the center of the alternate dimension move. Then, the ground shook heavily. What happened next made Rolling and the old liar dumbfounded. The ceiling of the house had been lifted off. It was a blood-colored giant that could lift the ceiling with one palm. The blood-red giant's body was inlaid with obscure golden patterns. It was over 100 meters tall and had a thick tail behind it. Blood god. He is a true blood god, a peerless expert in ancient times. The land of the blood god is his burial ground. After he died, he refined himself into a small world and turned it into this alternate dimension. Blood ancestor Wu Dao said proudly. Blood ancestor Taoist said proudly, I received the blood god's inheritance, and at the same time, I inherited this space. Here, the blood god is also a part of my small world. Blood god? Chun Zhao had never heard of this god before, but this didn't stop Chun Zhao from being curious about this blood god. He was definitely powerful. He was even more powerful than the god of strength that Chun Zhao had encountered in the abandoned Mount Olympus. Even if he was already dead, even if he had been dead for who knew how many thousands of years. This reminded Chun Zhao of the ancient remains that he'd found in the belly of Mount Chogo. The two weren't exactly strong or weak, but the way they dealt with their deaths clearly had their own characteristics and uniqueness. In the ancient remains of Mount Chogo, he had used a special circulation method to keep his remains from decaying for thousands of years, and he had also maintained his own small world. However, his essence, qi, and spirit had long dissipated. Other than the remains, there was nothing left. The blood god before him was even more special. He'd refined his own small world and himself into an alternate dimension. Chun Zhao didn't understand. He was gone, and his essence, qi, and spirit had all dissipated. Why did he leave his body behind? Was he going to leave it as a memento? For example, the blood god before him had been preserved quite well. He probably had 10 to 20% of his strength when he was alive. However, he didn't have any consciousness at all. In his eyes, he'd been treated like a giant toy by an ant. If he met someone weak, he'd just bully them. But now that he'd met Chun Zhao, he'd just be a piece of cake. If he'd been alive, he might have been able to exchange a few blows with Chun Zhao. but he was already dead. So, Chun Zhao wondered if he should help him clean up his mess and take over his inheritance, if he still had any. Chun Zhao looked at the blood-colored giant before him. Blood ancestor Daolis seemed to think that Chun Zhao had been scared out of his wits. This made him quite proud. Because he'd fought Chun Zhao 3 times before, he'd always been at a disadvantage. Now that he saw Chun Zhao scared out of his wits, his confidence skyrocketed again. Even the burns on his body didn't hurt as much anymore. Chun Zhao felt it was a pity. Such a huge amount of blood qi wasn't life force. How could blood qi gather? He could probably accumulate such a huge amount of life force by killing hundreds of thousands of people. This thing was used for big moves. It was useless at other times, at least not for Chun Zhao. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 2745. Dying. Blood ancestor Daolis controlled Blood God's body and grabbed at the 3 people in the house. If this slap landed, the entire house would probably be crushed by him. Rolling and old liars' faces were drained of blood. Chun Zhao tilted his head slightly and looked at the descending palm. A brand new power seeped out from the depths of Chun Zhao's body and gathered in his right arm. This power was refined from Chun Zhao's own immortal power, flame qi, and yin spirit power. The 3 of them combined into one. Chun Zhao called this power mixed elements qi. Different from chaotic qi, Chun Zhao's power could be said to be unique. Mixed elements, fusion, origin, beginning. Chun Zhao also combined this method of refinement with his own cultivation system and called it mixed elements return to one. Of course, Chun Zhao had only succeeded after reading through many books in the Celestial Master Sect's library on Dragon Tiger Mountain and combining it with his actual situation and many secluded cultivation sessions. Mixed elements return to one could be said to be the first time Chun Zhao had unified all his cultivation systems. In the past, Chun Zhao's cultivation system was mainly based on power and had many complex branches. However, even after this unification, Chun Zhao still kept some special powers that couldn't be integrated into the main system. For example, Dark Lava and the Immaculate Eye, and Chun Zhao's control over water. These were all spells or bloodline powers. Chun Zhao couldn't integrate these powers into mixed elements returned to one. The moment Blood God's huge palm came down, Chun Zhao also waved his right arm. Whoosh! Blood God's body flew thousands of meters away. At the same time, Blood God's right arm and shoulder completely disappeared. In the distance, there were marks left by Blood God's fall and roll. The scene was a ghastly sight. Rolling and Old Liar's eyes were about to fall out. Even Blood Ancestor Daolis was dumbfounded. Is this a joke? Is this an illusion? Blood Ancestor Daolis immediately flew back 100 meters. It was too dangerous to be in such close contact with this man. Blood Ancestor Daolis felt like his hair was standing on end. How much power was needed to send the Blood God, who was like a giant god, flying thousands of meters away? Blood God stood up again. It seemed that the punch hadn't caused any fatal damage. Of course, he was already a corpse. Blood God's shattered shoulder began to regrow. However, after a bit of flesh grew out, it quickly rotted away, and the hatched flesh fell off again. Blood Progenitor Daolis' expression changed drastically again. What was going on? Wasn't the Blood God's body indestructible? Why can't I recover? That punch just now is called Nerve Blade. If you want to heal his damaged body, you'd better get rid of the power I left in his muscles and nerves first. Of course, the so-called nerve knife was just something he made up on the spot. The alternate dimension and the Blood God's body were one. Therefore, the Blood God's body would absorb the blood qi in the alternate dimension to repair itself. However, ever since Chun Zhao's power system had been integrated and he had obtained primordial chaos qi, Chun Zhao's power system had been completely integrated. The primordial chaos qi was not only reflected in its destructive power. Furthermore, it had a continuous destructive effect on the physical body. For example, the enemies he had encountered in the past had strong recovery abilities. Basically, if he wanted to repair his body, he had to expel the power that Chun Zhao had left behind. To Chun Zhao, primordial chaos qi was beneficial for strengthening his body. However, it was definitely not good for his enemies. It was more troublesome than most viruses. It was even terrifying. Apart from killing the body's cells, it could also devour vitality and mental energy to make itself stronger. Therefore, it was even harder to get rid of. If he didn't know how to expel it, he might make the primordial chaos qi even stronger. Just like the blood god's body right now. Parts of the body that were corroded by the primordial chaos qi would lose their vitality and become rotten. Blood progenitor Dallas stared at Chun Zhao with an uncertain expression. Chun Zhao's strength was beyond his imagination. Where's the blood god's legacy? Give it to me, Chun Zhao said indifferently. You think I'll give it to you? Blood progenitor Dallas gritted his teeth and stared at Chun Zhao. His eyes seemed to flash with determination. Chun Zhao raised his arms. Blood progenitor Dallas immediately became alert. He could already sense that the situation might get out of control. However, he felt that he could still be saved. Chun Zhao's actions made him uneasy. After all, Chun Zhao had only used one arm and one punch to destroy the blood god's body. But now he actually raised his arms. It was obvious that this wasn't a normal attack. Just then, a large part of the dark blood-red sky suddenly caved in. It was as if someone was compressing the entire space from the outside in. Chun Zhao pulled his palms inwards slightly, and an even larger part appeared. The ground was also shaking. Huge, unknown red objects kept falling from the sky. Everyone in the alternate space felt like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Blood progenitor Dallas had been coughing up blood since Chun Zhao started attacking. He couldn't even struggle now. He couldn't even stop the bleeding for a moment. Chun Zhao was going to crush the alternate space. He was really going to crush the blood god space from the inside. Of course, it wasn't appropriate to say that he was crushing it. This was because Chun Zhao was compressing the blood qi in the alternate space from the outside. When blood progenitor Dallas was outside, he was only half a step into the enchanting state. His small world was connected to the 8 blood demons, forming a small world. But after entering this place, he was the master of this place. The entire land of the blood god was his small world. So, when Chun Zhao destroyed this place, it was reflected back to him. Actually, if it was a normal small world, Chun Zhao wouldn't be able to destroy it. But this place wasn't a normal small world. Chun Zhao's palms pressed inwards by another inch. The world closed up a little more. The surrounding ground continued to crack, and the sky shattered. Rolling and Old Liar were actually at the same level. One was an ordinary person, while the other was a more knowledgeable cultivator. But in Chun Zhao's eyes, they were all the same. A beetle and an ant were the same in the eyes of humans. And the way they looked at Chun Zhao was the same. It wasn't the way they looked at gods, but the way they looked at monsters. I'll kill you. Blood progenitor Dallas didn't expect his so-called immortal body anymore. The so-called immortal body could fool low-level cultivators like Old Liar. Even Old Liar, who was at his peak 20 years ago, was only a low-level cultivator in the eyes of some people. But the person before them was definitely one of the small group that stood at the top of the pyramid. The so-called undying body was nothing but a joke in the eyes of this group of people. Chapter 2746. Normal cultivators couldn't kill blood demons. That was because they couldn't destroy their magic structure. But the people at the top of the pyramid were different. They didn't care about magic structure at all. They destroyed it from a microscopic level. In fact, demonic creatures like the blood devils couldn't even take form in front of them. If they wanted to, they could turn blood demons into a pile of rotten meat. Compared to blood demons, these people were more like monsters walking in the human world. For example, what was happening right now? The land of the blood god was hundreds of square kilometers wide. It was being crushed by this monster. Dallas Blood had thought that he was already one of these monsters. He had the right to be called a monster. But when he really faced such a monster, he finally realized how naive and ridiculous his thoughts had been. He'd never been one of these monsters. He hadn't even gotten close. He'd been arrogant just because he'd refined the land of the blood god and grasped the shallow secrets of the Shangqing realm. He'd been naive enough to think that he could escape even if he encountered Zhang Tianyi. In fact, that wasn't his biggest mistake. He'd actually thought that no one in the entire Huaxia's supernatural world could do anything to him except Zhang Tianyi. He'd only been back for 2 days, and he'd already encountered such a monster. How many of these monsters were hidden in the entire Huaxia? Dallas Blood couldn't control the urge to vomit blood. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Chen Zhao's palms finally closed. The sky and ground were instantly shattered by the terrifying power. In Rolling and the old liar's eyes, everything in the world was collapsing. Dallas Blood's body also collapsed in an instant. A blood-colored figure quickly escaped from the dead body. But the next moment, Chen Zhao grabbed it. Dallas Blood's blood-colored soul struggled. But he wasn't Chen Zhao's match even when he was alive. Not to mention that his soul was weak after death. You don't really think you can escape, do you? Chen Zhao grinned. Dallas Blood saw that darkness was spreading over the crack in the collapsing world. And the man before him was the center of the darkness. He was definitely not a Taoist cultivator. He was a cultivator darker and more evil than Dallas Blood. Chen Zhao's dark shadow was corroding the land of the Blood God. Chen Zhao wanted to find out the Blood God's secret. Therefore, the land of the Blood God's physical body, and the Blood God's inheritance that Blood Patriarch Dallas had obtained were all indispensable. Now, all 3 of them were treated as his collection. Chen Zhao raised his hand and grabbed at the air with all his might. In an instant, the shattered, blood-colored world was taken away like a dining table. The sky regained its radiant, starry sky. Well, except for the building that was missing a section, everything else had returned to normal. Rolling and the old liar saw Dallas' soul being crushed into a glass orb and put away. The old swindler couldn't help but lament that he hadn't completely separated himself from the supernatural world. Why did the spirit world suddenly feel so foreign? The Dallas Blood ancestor, who had wreaked havoc 20 years ago and no one had been able to subdue him, had suddenly become so powerless? No. It wasn't that the Blood ancestor was incompetent. It was that man who was too terrifying. When did such a terrifying monster appear in Huaxia's supernatural world? Furthermore, he didn't look like a good person. At the very least, the black substance that engulfed the shattered space didn't seem like something a righteous cultivator would use. Of course, the old liar definitely wouldn't shout about killing demons and protecting the Tao. Killing demons and protecting the Tao required capital. And he couldn't even beat Dallas Blood ancestor. Not to mention Chen Zhao, who had beaten Dallas Blood ancestor to the point that his stomach was bleeding. It's almost daybreak. I should go. Goodbye, police comrade. Rolling stared at Chen Zhao's departing figure in a daze. She didn't say anything stupid like needing Chen Zhao's cooperation in the investigation. She didn't ask about the supernatural world that didn't belong to her. To her, everything she had experienced last night was too unimaginable. However, it was like a dream. It was destined to be a dream. What a terrifying guy, the old liar lamented as he watched Chen Zhao's departing figure. You're also his kind, right? Rolling asked, glancing at the old liar. My kind? You overestimate me. He's one of the top few people in the world. As for me, even if I didn't have my old injuries, I'd still be nothing compared to him at my peak. Although the old liar's cultivation wasn't as high as Dallas Blood ancestor, he still had sharp eyes. That kind of power that could destroy the world was definitely someone who existed at the top of the pyramid in the supernatural world. He probably wasn't bragging when he said that he had walked around the Celestial Master Sect's library on Dragon Tiger Mountain. Chen Zhao got the news from Zhang Tianyi. The case regarding Yu Qiming's death had been closed. The official answer was that he had committed suicide. According to the information Chen Zhao had obtained from Dallas Blood ancestor, Yu Qiming had indeed committed suicide. Of course, it could also be said that he had been bewitched by Dallas Blood ancestor. Yu Qiming wanted to find Chen Zhao for revenge. But he'd heard that Chen Zhao was also a cultivator. So, he found another way and actually contacted Dallas Blood ancestor. Then, he'd been bewitched by Dallas Blood ancestor. In a moment of impulse, Yu Qiming had cooperated and completed the blood demon transformation ritual. Dallas' blood ancestor had originally wanted to use Yu Keming as the 9th blood demon and then complete the 9 transformation blood demon art. But in the end, he'd still failed because of Chun Zhao. Yu Keming's soul had been destroyed by Dallas' blood ancestor. But Dallas' blood ancestor wasn't much better off than Yu Keming. It could even be said that Dallas' blood ancestor's current situation was partly due to Yu Keming. If Dallas' blood ancestor had chosen someone else as his 9th blood demon, he probably wouldn't have ended up like this. At least, he wouldn't have met Chun Zhao. That afternoon, Yi Ziqing and Zhang Ting came to find Chun Zhao again. Both of them apologized for the trouble they'd caused Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao didn't take it to heart. Chun Zhao felt that this wasn't trouble at all. Moreover, these things weren't something they could control. In order to express their apology, Yi Ziqing took the initiative to help Chun Zhao organize Chun Zhao's animation company's annual party. In another 2 or 3 days, the animation company's employees would also come back one after another. Of course, this wasn't just to help Chun Zhao. This was because Zhang Ting had been in charge of the party. Chun Zhao was only responsible for the money. Zhang Ting was in charge of everything else. Chun Zhao used his free time to make up for the time he'd wasted a few days ago and walked around Shanghai. Ever since that night, Rolling hadn't appeared before Chun Zhao again. Chapter 2747. Is this man our boss? A new employee secretly asked an old employee at the banquet table. Yes, our big boss. The old employee nodded. Chun Zhao said a few words on the stage and then left. After all, it was a gathering, not a meeting. Moreover, Chun Zhao felt that it would be very stupid to say a lot of nonsense in any situation. Usually, there were 3 treasures for company gatherings: food, program, and lucky draw. The food went without saying. It was one of the best restaurants in Shanghai, at least for the price. The program was to invite some second- or third-rate celebrities to perform. After the new year, many celebrities would leave their homes. It was normal for some companies to invite celebrities to perform for them. The prize of the lucky draw was just slightly better than that of an ordinary company's lucky draw, and the chances of winning were slightly higher. The so-called team building was actually a one-stop service of eating, drinking, and playing. In this aspect, Yi Ziqing arranged it better than Zhang Ting. It was said that before she became the technical director of this company, she'd been the HR manager and administrative director of a multinational company. Ms. Yi, are you interested in developing at our company? Chun Zhao asked Yi Ziqing, who was sitting across from him. Yi Ziqing smiled, but she was also considering Chun Zhao's invitation. Regarding her future, she couldn't just make a decision based on their relationship. Mr. Chun, do you know my current position and salary? I heard from Zhang Ting, Chun Zhao said. I can also give you the position of administrative director. Of course, the salary will be the highest in the country. Mr. Chun, I don't want a short-term salary. I want to see room for growth, not just for my position, but also for the company. Regarding growth, to be honest, I don't know how to manage a company, Chun Zhao said frankly. As for how big the company can be, I can't guarantee anything. It should be how big Zhang Ting wants it to be. The only thing I can do is not interfere with the company's management and development. I bought the company, but I'm more like an investor. I only invest money and don't manage it. Then, Mr. Chun, what's your goal in investing in Chinese comics? Is it for the return on investment, or for your so-called dream? Chun Zhao thought about it. Would he get beaten up if he told the truth? His goal was to recruit the most professional and imaginative team. You should know that the current domestic animation industry is not very developed. At least compared to the American and Japanese animation industry, it is still in its infancy. However, I believe that the potential of Chinese comics far surpasses that of any other market. The rate of return is secondary. If we can achieve a situation where we don't make a loss in the next 5 years and make a profit in the next 10 years, that would be a profit for me. Investing in Chinese comics is more about preserving my assets. This answer was very pertinent. At least, Yi Ziqing felt that it was reasonable. Moreover, Chun Zhao was one of the few investors who was willing to let go and not interfere with the company's development. She could tell from the information she got from Zhang Ting. Other than the fact that Chun Zhao's treatment far exceeded the requirements of the contract, he would also occasionally ask some strange questions. Chun Zhao was the perfect investor that entrepreneurs like the most. So far, there was only one person in the entire company that Chun Zhao had arranged to join. That was the supervisor in charge of finance, responsible for supervising the company's financial situation. But even so, Yi Ziqing wouldn't accept it easily, because sometimes a person's will would not always be able to do as they pleased, even the investors themselves. If the investors' funds were disconnected, they might make up for it in other ways or raise funds. For example, they might sell the company they invested in. Such situations were everywhere. So, Yi Ziqing felt that she had to ask about Chun Zhao's personal situation. Mr. Chun, what other investments do you have overseas? All my investments and assets are in real estate, and I don't owe the bank a single cent, so you don't have to worry about me running out of funds. My current net worth should be enough to buy 10,000 animation companies. If I compare it to the Forbes list of the world's richest people, my net worth should be equal to the sum of the top 3 people on the list. Yi Ziqing gasped. The sum of the top 3? Are you kidding me? What did that mean? The first place on the Forbes list had more than $100 billion. The second and third places also had $100 billion. In other words, Chun Zhao's net worth was more than $200 billion? Then why isn't Mr. Chin's name on the Forbes list? Because most of my assets are unlisted. Oh no, apart from the 20% shares of Caribbean Empire Cruise Line, I also have some Citibank shares and some PLM shares. These familiar stocks were enough to make Yi Ziqing's heart skip a beat. Even 1% of these shares was already wealth that most people in the world couldn't earn in their entire lives. However, these things were only a small portion of Chun Zhao's wealth. The value of these shares should be enough for Mr. Chun to enter the Forbes top 10, right? The 20% of Caribbean Empire Cruise Line is an unregistered share, but with just Citibank and PLM shares, I should be able to enter the top 20 next year. He could become one of the top 20 richest people in the world with a small portion of the listed company's shares. This shocking wealth made Yi Ziqing speechless. Then, she thought about her previous plans. Yi Ziqing suddenly felt so insignificant. Before absolute wealth, anyone would feel insignificant. I also have a company with 90% absolute shares. It's also the most profitable in the world. Chun Zhao was obviously talking about Dash and Beer. Because it wasn't listed, there were no financial reports. However, Dash and Beer was definitely one of the most profitable. So, my 2 days' income can probably be used to invest in Chinese comics, Chun Zhao said with a shrug. Yi Ziqing suddenly didn't want to talk to Chun Zhao anymore. She suddenly understood why Chun Zhao would give his employees benefits so much. Why Fei Lai didn't even consider if she would max out her credit card when she shopped. This guy really had too much money to spend. Mr. Chun, you don't want to invest in something with high returns? High returns also mean high risks. This doesn't match my personality. I'd rather leave my money in the bank to earn interest than do risky investments. The interest Chun Zhao earned from leaving his money in the bank was different from ordinary people. Chun Zhao's savings in the bank had already exceeded $15 billion. Even banks would go crazy over such a huge amount. Chapter 2748. Yi Ziqing was shocked. She knew that Chun Zhao was rich. Zhang Ting had said it many times. However, Zhang Ting's words were still a bit subjective. She thought that Chun Zhao looked like a nouveau riche. It was just that he had made a fortune abroad. She was saying that Chun Zhao's money wouldn't last long. But now, Yi Ziqing finally understood. Even if Chun Zhao squandered, he wouldn't be able to keep up with his earning speed. Even if he bought a Gulfstream 8,500 a day, he would have extra money. Plus, Chun Zhao didn't like high-risk investments. This would ensure that his wealth wouldn't increase in a short time. But it would also ensure that his wealth wouldn't shrink in a short time. Plus, he didn't think that a nouveau riche could be richer than the world's richest man. Yi Ziqing felt that following Chun Zhao would have a bright future. Plus, Chun Zhao's domestic animation company could become a springboard for Chun Zhao's trusted subordinates. Plus, Chun Zhao didn't like to interfere with the company's management and development. This would give executives like her more room to perform. What executives were most afraid of was the mentality of, I'm the big boss and everyone has to listen to me. I'm rich, so my opinions are professional. Mr. Chun, I think you're rich, but there's a problem with the way you present it. What problem? You're too nice to your employees. Zhang Ting said this too. She said that if you help them, they'll get revenge. If you give them high benefits and bonuses, they'll only think you're stupid. You have to let them know that you're rich, but you can't keep giving them high benefits and bonuses. Then I'll order 2 big meals every day, 1 to eat and 1 to pass. Is that okay? Actually, as long as you improve your food, taste, and temperament, people will naturally feel your wealth and status. I can't let them watch me eat, drink, and poop every day, right? Mr. Chun, you're abroad every day. We can't see you even if we want to, but it's easy to let them know that you're rich. They already know that I'm rich. It's different. They know you're rich, but they just think that you're a nouveau riche. Is there a difference? I'll tell you an effective method. What method? Go to a city and buy the most luxurious house there. Although the global real estate market has fluctuated greatly in the past 50 years, the price of high-end residential housing has been steadily increasing and has never fallen. Therefore, investing in high-end real estate is also a good choice, especially this kind of purchasing investment method. For you, there is no pressure and you can obtain a good rate of return. You can also show your wealth to your employees. That's a good idea. Shall we start now? Of course. Do you have any recommendations in Shanghai? There are only a few high-end mansions in Shanghai, and the most famous one is Thompson. I know this series, but it should be very popular. It's the exact opposite. Thompson Premium has been open for 15 years. In these 15 years, they've only sold half of it. Their annual sales plan is to sell 5 sets. Yi Ziqing said again, of course, there are more high-end houses in Shanghai than just Thompson, so Mr. Chun has many choices. Why didn't I think of buying a house in every place we go? It will be much more convenient for my family to travel in the future. We don't have to stay in hotels all day. Actually, in terms of business, Chun Zhao was indeed a noob. He also knew how talented he was in business. Therefore, he would never let an amateur command an expert. Chun Zhao had his current wealth because he knew how weak he was. Yi Ziqing's method was actually to show off his muscles in business. Rich people bought airplanes and yachts for the same purpose. For the top rich, they could enjoy the best quality of life no matter if they rented or bought it. But they still chose to buy it. Other than the return on investment, it was also because buying airplanes and yachts represented their muscles. Nevertheless, selling airplanes, yachts, and houses would all bring about a huge cash pressure. This meant that even if they had enough money, they would still choose to buy with loans. Once something happened to their business, their airplanes, yachts, or houses would probably be taken away by the bank too. This was also why the rich would go bankrupt if something happened to them. Some fluctuations in the market would make the banks nervous, which would make them withdraw their funds. Then, the rich who took loans would also be affected by the bank's policies, resulting in a series of problems. Of course, these problems were not problems for Chun Zhao, because Chun Zhao was cash flow now. No fluctuations or shocks could affect Chun Zhao. Even if the housing market stretched from the Himalayas to the Mariana Trench, nothing would happen to Chun Zhao. Actually, there were many ways to show off his muscles. But that was too high profile. Yi Ziqing realized that Chun Zhao actually didn't like to be high profile. Otherwise, he would have easily made it onto the Forbes rich list. So, Yi Ziqing only used this low-profile method. She just had to let the employees know that their boss was very, very rich. That was enough. Yi Ziqing finally decided to join the animation company. With her reputation in the professional management industry, this was actually marrying the animation company. Under normal circumstances, a professional manager like Yi Ziqing, who had proven her ability and had sufficient qualifications, could totally find a more successful and promising company. Not Chun Zhao's animation company, which had just been established. Even before this, there hadn't been a single successful company. Yi Ziqing actually still valued Chun Zhao. Yi Ziqing didn't just want to lead the animation company to success. Instead, she wanted to join the core members of Chun Zhao's interest group and become a part of it. The next day, under Yi Ziqing's arrangements, all the employees were arranged to go to a vacation villa. Currently, most of the vacation villas in China existed in the form of farmhouses. However, this holiday villa near Shanghai was a true holiday villa. Beautiful scenery and delicious food were the basic requirements. There were also man-made ski resorts and amusement park facilities. Moreover, there were also some tame wild animals, which made this holiday villa an excellent place for a vacation. Plus, the surrounding environment made the employees of the animation company enjoy it so much that they forgot to leave. All the group expenses here would be paid by Chun Zhao. But apart from the vacation, Chun Zhao still requested for the special meeting. Chapter 2749. Boss, what's going on with this meeting? We were having a good time. Why did we suddenly have a meeting? Has our big boss gone crazy? The new employee secretly asked his team leader. At this moment, the team leader looked like he hadn't slept for the whole night. Or perhaps he was angered to the core. Anyway, he seemed to be in a very good state. The team leader was probably in a very bad mood at this moment. After all, he had such a good time these 2 days. Last night, he suddenly announced that the big boss would hold a special meeting today. At that time, he felt that the atmosphere had become very strange. In his heart, he wondered if this so-called special meeting had caused public anger. Shut up. Be more respectful to our livelihood. The team leader held the document in his hand tightly. In fact, he had only been on the job for less than 2 months. However, in the span of 2 months, he had experienced 2 special meetings. However, the first 2 special meetings were sudden situations. The big boss had made up his mind at the last minute. So at that time, all the employees were at a loss and were caught off guard. Later, the few proposals that were given to the big boss were actually relatively low-end proposals in the eyes of the team leader. Anyway, as a professional team leader, he felt that he could handle that kind of proposal. At the same time, he also felt sorry and regretful for not being able to come up with a better proposal at that time. In fact, this kind of mentality was shared by most of the employees. After all, this proposal could be exchanged for real money, and it was something that no one could erase. After all, they weren't dealing with their superior. It was their big boss. As for the new employees, such as Xiao Wang in front of him, of course, the team leader wouldn't tell him easily. After all, one more person meant one more competitor. The team leader was definitely not the only one who had this kind of thought. Almost all the employees with a little bit of experience thought so. The few new employees looked at the old employees who were arriving one after another. They found that the expressions of these old employees were a little strange. They looked a little nervous. The stiff expression on his face made him look very unhappy. The new employees thought that it was because of this impromptu meeting that made them unhappy. In fact, these old employees were in a kind of excited mood at the moment. Soon, the new employees found that these old employees had prepared a document. They even found that even the sweeping Annie who came with the group had prepared a document. Strange, what was that document for? Was it sent by the higher-ups about the content of this special meeting? Why didn't they have it? Team leader, what is this document for? What's the content of this meeting? No, it's just for show. Our big boss likes this set. The team leader explained casually. Oh, then do I need to prepare one too? No need. There's so many people here anyway. Big boss might not notice you. Besides, the meeting is about to start. All right then. Just then, Chen Zhao walked into the hall. Glancing at the staff in the venue, he picked up a microphone and went straight to the point. I'm sure everyone knows the content of this meeting. It's still the person with codename X, and the reward rules are the same. We'll follow the results of the previous meeting. But it's different from last time. X has comprehended an inner world. You can ask your questions now. The so-called principles were what Chun Zhao had said. They needed to analyze them as real people. It was impossible to deny whether this statement was in line with science or physics. They only needed to think according to this line of thought, or to make up for the imperfections or inaccuracies. President Chun, I want to know the settings of the inner world, the team leader asked impatiently. First, the inner world is the sea of consciousness. When X's spiritual power explosively increases, it also connects with the external world, forming a more complete force field. The term inner world comes from Taoist culture. It means that heaven and earth are united. The inner world is vast and boundless. In theory, it's endless. Rather than saying it's an inner world, it's more like a microscopic universe. The inner world also has an endless capacity for energy, but this capacity will still affect the body and become a burden on the body. So, even though the inner world is limitless, the body still has a limit. Chen Zhao talked endlessly about the inner world. Some of the information was something he'd already proven. Some of the information was guessed and deduced based on his own situation. He couldn't prove it right or wrong yet. Chen Zhao glanced at the people in the room. Now, you can start to follow my train of thought to perfect or correct my settings. President Chen, I think there's a problem with X's development of the inner world. Oh? What problem? When X's inner world absorbs external energy, it will burden the body. I don't think there should be a burden. Why? That's because apart from his inner world, his inner core is also constantly absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Why doesn't his body feel burdened when it absorbs energy? Instead, his inner world, a spiritual world that should be invisible and intangible, feels burdened? Chen Zhao couldn't help but fall silent. The employee continued. Feeling a burden means that the inner world and X's body have formed a connection. Or rather, they're one. It's like how ordinary people feel full when they eat too much, but the inner world eats too much and doesn't digest it. President Chen only said that the inner world absorbs energy, but he didn't say that the energy is refined. Although it can be used, it's only a very basic transformation and release of energy. It still lacks the most important process of digesting energy. Because of this, it's a burden on the body. Chen Zhao nodded unconsciously. He seemed to have really neglected this problem. The employee paused and continued to state his point of view. And X is always focused on quantity, not quality. Let's say that if the inner world absorbs quantity and digests it, it becomes quality. President Chen has always emphasized that X's energy is several times or even dozens of times that of cultivators of the same level. This is an advantage, but now it's a disadvantage. Why? For the same reason, is it faster to digest 1 unit of energy or 100 units of energy faster? In other words, X will need several times or even dozens of times more time to digest the energy than cultivators of the same level, right? Yes, but in terms of energy refinement, everyone is different. Chen Zhao glanced at Zhang Ting beside him. I'll give him 20 points. The crowd burst into an uproar. Even Zhang Ting looked surprised. My parents were afraid that I would die, so they sent me to live in a Taoist temple in the mountains for 2 years. They even donated a few dozen yuan, so I became a Taoist for a few years. It was only after I entered middle school that I left the Taoist temple. However, I'll give you 20 points. Your understanding of Taoism is very helpful to me. Little Wei immediately sat down happily. Team leader, what is this score for? Little Wang asked softly. Is it for performance evaluation? Our company is in the animation business. I don't think we do a performance evaluation, right? Little Wang could see that many envious and jealous gazes were directed at his team leader. Wasn't it just a score given by the big boss? Was there a need for that murderous look? What a huge grudge. It's nothing. I'm just here to exchange it for money, Little Wei said lightly. Oh, exchange it for money? No wonder. Little Wang pouted. He was not interested. However, why did his colleagues all act like they had never seen the world before? Wasn't it just some money? Was there a need for such a deep grudge? Team leader, how much can 1 point be exchanged for? Little Wang stretched out a finger. 10 yuan? 100 yuan? Don't tell me it's 1,000 yuan? Little Wang thought for a moment and looked at the naked gazes around him. His heart could not help but race. If 1 point could be exchanged for 1,000 yuan, didn't his team leader earn 20,000 yuan just because of what he said just now? That was really possible. If it was just 1 point for 100 yuan, these people would not have such ferocious gazes. It seemed like he had to fight for it. It's 10,000 yuan. 10,000 yuan? Little Wang's eyes widened. He looked at his team leader in shock. It's 10,000 yuan for 20 points, right? No, it's 10,000 yuan for 1 point. Team leader, your speech just now was worth 200,000 yuan, right? Yes, it's 200,000 yuan, but it's not in yuan. Where's the currency from? Korean or Japanese? Don't tell me it's Vietnamese dong. It's in US dollars. 200,000. Little Wei's face was red. Little Wang's eyes widened even more. How is that possible? 200,000? If it was changed to yuan, it was enough to buy a house in a second or third-tier city. Even in first-tier cities other than Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, 200,000 was enough for a down payment. You didn't tell me. I thought you knew, Little Wei said, chuckling. What a joke. The competition is so intense now. If I tell you, it will be even more intense. This was Little Wei's true thoughts. It was also what most employees were thinking. Little Wang's heart was filled with remorse, just like most of the employees. He looked at Chun Zhao expectantly. Just then, a few more people stood up to speak. You're not bad. 1 point for each of you as encouragement. Everyone roughly understood that the last few people's speeches did not satisfy Chun Zhao. The so-called not bad meant that it was barely passable. The few people were helpless too. The materials they had prepared for the exam did not match what Chun Zhao wanted to hear this time. Therefore, it was naturally difficult for them to satisfy Chun Zhao. But I still hope that the later speeches can be more professional. Actually, Chun Zhao had already gained a lot from today's special meeting. At least, compared to the money he had paid, it was completely negligible. The first person mentioned his current key problem. As for the second person, he mentioned his own path forward. Zhang Ting had made a similar suggestion before. However, Zhang Ting's suggestion was still at a shallow stage. This person's suggestion, on the other hand, was more profound but not hard to understand. Moreover, he was proficient in Taoism. His quotations were more convincing. The second person's speech was not bad either. If it had been before, Chun Zhao would probably have given him more points. However, if it was said later, it would be obvious who was better. It would be difficult to gain Chun Zhao's approval. Chapter 2751. After the special meeting, the new employees finally understood. They'd thought that the big boss just wanted to make his presence known. So, they didn't take it to heart last night. On the other hand, the older employees were all preparing in secret. In the end, a few of the well-prepared old employees made a lot of money. Apart from the first two who spoke, they got 20 points. A few others got 5 to 10 points too. That was about a quarter of the total. The new employees who lost their chance all beat their chests. They regretted back then, President Chun, I really don't understand the purpose of this special meeting. Yi Ziqing looked at Chun Zhao, confused. Zhang Ting once said that you're planning to shoot a movie in Hollywood and need to perfect the settings. Yes, is there a problem? I still know about Hollywood's assembly line operation model. Hollywood has its own team of screenwriters. It is impossible to find outsiders to do the setting. What's more, even a screenwriter team can't easily invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. In addition to what Zhang Ting said before, you seem to have invested millions of dollars in this X setting. This is very unreasonable. Okay, don't worry about this. I'll request these special meetings from time to time. Apart from that, I won't interfere with any decisions or development of the company. To Yi Ziqing, this was just Chun Zhao's personal temper. It wasn't a problem for the company. She naturally wouldn't waste time discussing the meaning of this with Chun Zhao. She only asked Chun Zhao out of curiosity. As for whether Chun Zhao knew how to squander. Squandering was also a matter of talent. As long as Chun Zhao didn't go to wholesale nuclear warheads, his family business wouldn't be finished. Yi Ziqing and Zhang Ting also received Chun Zhao's orders. They could spend as much money as they could on the following group projects. Anyway, he had to let the employees know that he was rich, very rich. Actually, this was already an unnecessary move. Chun Zhao planned to go home in a few days. His domestic matters had also come to an end. Chun Zhao didn't have many special arrangements for Mo Han. He just wanted him to start a company first. For now, there was nothing else he needed to deal with. But that might not be the case in the future. After all, Chun Zhao was overseas. If there was something he needed to deal with in China, it would be much more convenient to have a local spokesperson. Mr. Chun, are you still in Shanghai? Chun Zhao received another call from Wang He. Although he was a little surprised, it was reasonable. Compared to the first time he met Wang He was still a little childish. The current Wang He had matured a lot, be it in terms of speech or behavior. In fact, Wang He was only 2 or 3 years younger than Chun Zhao. However, after he graduated, he had a good path to stardom and was controlled by his management company and manager. Therefore, he had very little personal experience. This was also why Chun Zhao felt that it was childish. But after not seeing him for a year, Wang He had become a completely different person. At the very least, Wang He was on point when it came to being steady. Yeah, I'm still here, but I've booked a flight back to Los Angeles the day after tomorrow. That's great. I'm going to Shanghai today, too. Last time we parted ways in a hurry, so I didn't have the chance to meet up with Mr. Chun. This time, I finally have the chance. Superstar, are you free? I've just been banned. Now that all my work has been cleared, I'm thinking of getting my unemployment benefits. Haha. Wang He said with a chuckle. Chun Zhao did not think much of it. Wang He was a famous celebrity. Wang He was a famous star, so even if others wanted to ban him, they couldn't. Unless he had done something against the law or morality and it had been exposed. Then the country would ban him. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, no company would be able to ban Wang He. What happened? Nothing. I just broke up with my management company and decided to give myself a few days off, Wang He said casually. The management company that he had just terminated his contract with would have a hard time replacing an artist that was 2 levels lower than him, let alone banning him. The so-called ban was just a bargaining chip. If Wang He was willing, he could just throw the penalty fee in the other party's face and call it a day. Of course, if he really did that, there would be enmity between them. They were all in the entertainment industry, so of course they couldn't do that. After all, they would meet frequently. Also, if he forcefully terminated his contract, it would affect Wang He's image and reputation. Therefore, if they fell out, it would be a lose-lose situation. No one would end up well. The reason why the matter hadn't been exposed yet was that their teams were still negotiating in private. After the negotiation, they would smile and say that they parted peacefully. Then, they would compliment each other and show that they were good partners. If the negotiation didn't go well, they would expose each other in the media and slander each other. This was the normal process. All right, since you're free and I'm still here, let's get together. Chun Zhao's impression of Wang He had improved a lot. At least, Wang He was a mature person now. Therefore, interacting with him wasn't a bad memory. When Chun Zhao saw Wang He again, he was still wearing a mask, but the big group of people behind him was gone. There was only an unfamiliar follower. Mr. Chun. Wang He came over and greeted him. He pulled out a chair and sat down. At the same time, he said to his assistant, Xiao He, go sit over there. I'm going to talk to my friend. Oh, okay, Brother Wang. Xiao He's assistant was quite young. He looked like he had just graduated from school. Before they met, Chun Zhao had already guessed that Wang He would change his assistant. Sister Li was too domineering last time. Her domineering personality was the same as Wang He's. Therefore, they couldn't work together for long. Xiao He's assistant, on the other hand, was basically an obedient child. Chun Zhao didn't know the future, but he was a ball of dough in front of Wang He right now. Mr. Chun, how are you doing in China? I'm not a foreigner, although I'm living abroad now. Your words make me feel like I'm talking to a foreigner. Haha, why do you care? I'm just asking. Wang He laughed. Mr. Chun, do you remember my suggestion last time? What suggestion? Chun Zhao didn't remember. I plan to open a studio and want to invite you to invest. Chun Zhao shook his head. Sorry, I don't have such plans. Chen Ku, Sister Chen wants to invest too, Wang He reminded him. We're cousins, but we're not as close as you think. Chun Zhao shrugged. I'm not even close to you. Chapter 2752. If you don't have enough money, I can lend you some, Chun Zhao said calmly. Wang He smiled. It wasn't that he didn't have enough money. He just needed connections. With his name, as long as he spread the word, a lot of people would be willing to invest in him. Therefore, he didn't lack money or investments. He invited Chen Zhao because he liked Chen Zhao's strong capital and connections in Hollywood. If it was just money, Wang He didn't lack rich people like that. Mr. Chen, don't you want to know about the future plans of my studio? Sure. Chen Zhao didn't reject him. I've already contacted a few big international companies, Wang He said. They're all interested in signing endorsements with me, but I'll only sign with them after my dispute with the management company is over. Wang He's meaning was clear. If Chen Zhao was willing to cooperate, he could get back his initial investment in an instant. Wang He's popularity in China and status in the entertainment industry meant that he wouldn't lose money investing in him. Even in the Asian region, Wang He had a huge market appeal. This was one of the few investments that would definitely make a profit. Of course, this alone wouldn't be enough to move Chen Zhao. If Chen Zhao kept his money in the bank, he could still make a profit. The interest rate he signed with the bank was higher than the depreciation of the currency. Wang He secretly observed Chen Zhao's expression. He was slightly disappointed by Chen Zhao's calm response. But this was within his expectations. After all, Chen Zhao had a big business. This small benefit wasn't enough to move him. Of course, this is a routine work arrangement. At the same time, I also bought some popular domestic IP, including 3 movies and 2 TV series. Although 2 of the TV series have not yet started shooting, they have been ordered by 2 provincial satellite TV stations to premiere them. Among the 3 movies, 1 is for the international market. At the same time, my studio also signed a contract with the largest domestic video platform, Penguin, to cooperate with 3 variety shows in the first round. Wang He talked nonstop about his work plans and the studio's plans. He also talked about the future he envisioned. Chen Zhao had to admit that Wang He had done work before coming to see Chen Zhao. At least his words were meaningful and his attitude wasn't arrogant or impatient. Even if he didn't have his current status in the entertainment industry, working with someone like him could ensure the return of his investment. Chen Zhao rubbed his chin and considered. Other than the return of investment, there's something more important. Wang He looked at Chen Zhao. What is it? Influence, Wang He said. At present, there are already several international public welfare organizations that are in talks with my team, preparing for further cooperation. At the government level, there are also 2 cities that intend to invite me to be their city's image representative. At present, I'm still observing to see which city is more worthy of me being their image representative. The more halos I have, in the future, as my partners, if they need to speak up, they can also speak through me. This will also attract more attention. Chen Zhao could not help but raise his head and examine Wang He seriously. He did not expect Wang He to have already considered this issue. Right now, most of the artists were still struggling with the problem of raising their status. On the other hand, Wang He was already considering the issue of his influence. But he had to admit that Wang He's plan was indeed very attractive. Chen Zhao wasn't interested in the return, but he wasn't against it either. Mr. Chen, I remember you told me last time that you've just acquired a Chinese animation studio. After investigating for the past few days, I found out that the studio has been transformed into an animation company. From my perspective, I can also make a positive direction for the company's works. So if I invest in your studio, what do I need to do? If Mr. Chen has suitable resources in Hollywood, please help me get them. Wang He looked at Chen Zhao with burning eyes. After tasting the sweetness, Wang He naturally couldn't forget about Hollywood. It wasn't just the domestic entertainment industry. In fact, Hollywood was the entertainment center of the entire world. This was an indisputable fact. Celebrities outside of Hollywood flocked to Hollywood like ducks. Wang He could not live the rest of his life with the halo of his past. Although he was still in his prime, he also needed to plan ahead. As his former guide in Hollywood, Chen Zhao naturally had this right. I can't promise you anything about this, Chen Zhao said. This condition isn't mandatory, but if Mr. Chen happens to have this opportunity, please consider me first. How much investment do you need? 100 million, 20% of the shares. 100 million was not a small amount, even if it was RMB. If it was someone else, even if it was 100% of the shares, Chen Zhao would not care. But this person was Wang He. He was worth this price. My assistant will contact you tomorrow, Chen Zhao said. Wang He finally revealed a relaxed smile. How many shares does Chunku have? Also 25%. Not only is she a partner, but she's also the studio's product. Wang He said, the studio is specially for her and me. All the resources are allocated to us. Our positions are similar and we don't have any conflicts of resources, so there's no competition. Chen Zhao nodded. After all, their gender determined the division of resources, so the possibility of them working together was higher than competing for resources. By the way, have you decided on the name of the studio? Dream Entertainment, Wang He said. Then I wish you and Chunku's dreams come true and success in your career. Us. Other than investing in movies and variety shows, are there any other businesses? Also, trainee training. Chen Zhao did not know much about trainees. Trainees? Those little fresh meats? Actually, those that can already be seen in the media are already successful artists. They have their own fan groups, their own images, and their own personas. They can already make money. If they can also produce a good work, they'll be considered to be in the top tier. Then is training trainees profitable? Definitely not in the early stages. If you don't invest, there won't be any returns. How's the risk? It's not small, Wang Yi said emotionally as an experienced person. In fact, this was the path he had taken. First, he was a trainee, then he debuted. He had his moments of glory, but the period before he met Chen Zhao was also his lowest point. If the risk is so high, why do you still do this? Do you believe it, Mr. Chun? I do, Chen Zhao answered after some thought. Feelings are one thing, but as an industry insider, I know some operational plans that can avoid a lot of risks, so I'm quite confident in this. High risk also means high return. Chapter 2753. Xiaohe, come and meet Mr. Chun. He'll be one of your bosses in the future. Xiaohe walked over to Chen Zhao, trembling. President Chun, hello. Xiaohe looked at Chen Zhao with some fear in her eyes. It was probably because in the movies, anyone with the word boss wasn't a good person. So, she kept her head down in front of Chen Zhao and didn't dare to meet his eyes. Wang He was quite observant. He probably knew what was going on in Xiaohe's mind. He could only give Chen Zhao an apologetic look. Chen Zhao smiled and shook his head. Actually, they'd all experienced this kind of immaturity in society before. No one would give Xiaohe a hard time because of this. For the people of society, immaturity was a rare and precious quality in their eyes. Just then, Chen Zhao received Fei Lai's call. Darling, I think the kids and I are being watched. Hearing Fei Lai's words, Chen Zhao's expression changed. He said to Wang He and Xiaohe, I'm going to take a call. After walking out of the restaurant, Chen Zhao asked, You're outside now? No, in the hotel. How did you find out? I don't know. It's just a feeling. I'll go back now, Chen Zhao said. Although he felt that this kind of thing was very mysterious, sometimes it was just an illusion. However, Chen Zhao didn't think that it was Fei Lai's illusion. Everyone in the family was normal. Even Fei Lai, who was the closest to a normal person, had her senses strengthened because of Chen Zhao's protection spells. Since she sensed that someone was watching her, it was very likely that she was right. Chen Zhao didn't want to gamble with Fei Lai and his family. Even if there was no danger, he had to eliminate it. If there was danger, he had to be prepared. After greeting Wang He, Chen Zhao hurried back to the hotel. Fei Lai, how's it going? Gone, Fei Lai said. After you came back, the feeling disappeared. Fei Lai frowned and looked at Chen Zhao. I'm not joking. That feeling makes my hair stand on end. Frowning, Fei Lai looked at him. I'm not joking with you. That feeling makes my hair stand on end. Chen Zhao didn't feel it, but he still chose to believe Fei Lai. Chen Zhao analyzed the situation in his mind. Fei Lai was abroad and didn't know any enemies in the spiritual world. The people she knew were all from the supernatural organization. They would never hurt or spy on their own family. Thus, either the person monitoring them was not from the spirit world, or was a cultivator from the country. However, he had no clue. Let's say it was a friar watching Fei Lai. Their ultimate target was very likely to be him. If it was an ordinary person spying on Fei Lai and her children, they might be looking for money. If he was a cultivator, then his goal would be much more complicated. If it was a cultivator, the other party would have chosen to retreat the moment he returned. However, his shadow vision did not detect it. Shadow vision allowed him to sense gazes from the shadows. No matter how vague it was, even if it was through surveillance cameras, he could sense it as long as it was subjective. But Chun Zhao did not activate shadow vision. Putting aside the other party's strength, at the very least, his standard was very high. Just then, he received West's call. West, what's wrong? President, are you in China now? Yeah, I'll be going back in 2 days. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it when we get back. No, guild leader, can you postpone it for 2 days? Why? Are you planning to usurp the throne in my absence? West didn't think the joke was funny at all. He'd found Chun Zhao in the first place. Plus, he didn't think that he had the ability and prestige to replace Chun Zhao. What a joke. If he had such thoughts, the members of the supernatural organization would probably be more than happy to tie him up and send him to Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao was too powerful. Furthermore, this kind of despairingly powerful strength also prevented anyone from having any thoughts of betrayal or resistance. Moreover, the supernatural organization only had a few people. Almost all the resources were obtained by Chun Zhao. If they chased Chun Zhao away, the people who stayed would hate them. Tell me what's up. President, we've formed an alliance with a Chinese sect. A Chinese sect is interested in the supernatural organization? Chun Zhao was Chinese, but he knew that Chinese sects were all arrogant. The supernatural organization called itself an international organization, but it was actually a third-rate organization. The North American branch that Chun Zhao belonged to was even more remote. It was third-rate among third-rate organizations. Forming an alliance with a Chinese sect? Are you sure you're not joking? It's mainly because we have dragon products on hand. Some time ago, Ruan Faxi made a batch of dragon blood jades and put them on the market, but they were immediately snapped up. Then, the buyers somehow found us and learned that we had more dragon blood on hand, so they planned to buy it all. However, we don't need that much money, so after a while, we reached an agreement. We can form an alliance and help each other. We could buy some of their magic and specialties, and we can also provide dragon blood. They will buy at the market price, so it's a mutual exchange. At the same time, we can recommend 3 disciples to exchange places with each other every year, and they can go to each other's organization or sect to learn each other's spells. Damn, it's an exchange? That's a good thing. Yes, it's a good thing, but something happened. What happened? Did they go back on their word? That's not the case. The people who made the agreement with us didn't go back on their word. Their sect's elders and sect master personally promised them and even signed a magic contract. However, there was a problem in their sect. What's the problem? There's a rebellion in their sect. Right now, we only got some information through special channels. Their leader is dead. Of the 4 elders who made an agreement with us, 1 is heavily injured, 1 is captured, and 2 are missing. Not long ago, the 2 missing elders contacted us, hoping to get our help. It's not good for outsiders like us to get involved in their sect's internal affairs, right? It's their princess. She's in danger and needs our protection, but we're overseas. With our power, we don't dare to get involved in China's supernatural affairs. We don't have a princess in China. It's the leader's daughter. Chun Zhao's side. Are you sure you want to get involved? Even if I get involved, I'm still an outsider. If I don't handle it well, it might cause endless trouble. But we've already made an agreement with them. We're allies. Now that the leader is dead, if we don't care about his daughter, that's going back on our word. Chapter 2754. Then what do you mean? We'll talk about cooperation later, but we have to save the girl at least. President, don't you think so? I don't have time now. Chun Zhao was still having a headache over his family. He didn't have time to save a stranger like a princess. President, what's more important than saving a princess whose life is in danger? Fei Lai and the kids are being watched. I don't have any leads yet. Do you think I have time to wander around at a time like this? Also, the leader's daughter isn't a princess. West fell silent. Fine. If you have the girl's contact information, give her a call and let her come to me. It's easy for me to protect her under my eyes, but I really don't have the time to look for her all over the country. No. No contact number? You don't have any elders who can contact you? They don't either. So they're missing people? Forget it. They've probably been eliminated by now. The fights between sects in China are very cruel. Killing 9 generations is basic. They're definitely not dead. That's what their elders said. Their elders can't even find a single person, and they're so confident that they're going to trick you into this and drag you down. And you're so confident that you're going to agree? I don't think they're bad people. West, I think you're usually a smart person. Why do you have to get involved in this? So what if they're saved? That sect has already changed its name. Although the alliance is no longer valid, don't make enemies. It's really troublesome. President, I think there's something wrong with you. You're usually fearless. How come you're even more cowardly than me now? Anyway, I don't care. If you want to do it yourself. If we foreigners go to China, we'll be targeted as soon as we get off the plane. We're too eye-catching and can't move at all. President, you're Chinese. It's convenient for you. How about I protect Fei Lai and the kids while you save them? Save it. Chen Zhao didn't even know who was watching Fei Lai and the kids. It would be fine if they were weak, but in Huaxia's supernatural world, all sorts of demons and ghosts could exist. Chen Zhao had defeated 3 terrifying existences that were hard to come by overseas in the past month. Right, there was also the Dallas blood ancestor. He was considered half a Dallas blood ancestor. The supernatural organization's strength was above average in the world. However, this did not include Huaxia's supernatural world. The supernatural organization was nothing compared to the Huaxia supernatural community. It couldn't even cause a ripple. If the supernatural society was fighting on home soil, relying on the territory of Kong Mosa and the headquarters, they were basically not afraid of any enemy. Even if it was a super expert, they would be able to block it for at least half an hour. Chen Zhao would be able to make it in time. But in China, from the moment they set foot on this land, there were probably dozens of pairs of eyes staring at them. The supernatural organization dared to go against everything in the United States. Even a fart here would cause a misunderstanding. Guild leader, I beg you. Is that girl your illegitimate daughter? Is there a need for this? No, I have to keep my promise. If guild leader doesn't agree, I'll come here myself. I won't bring anyone else. I'll come alone. Fuck, Chen Zhao cursed inwardly. This old bastard also knew how to play this kind of trick. What did he mean? Wasn't he just saying that he was going to die? Fine. Tell me that's sect. I'll think of something for you. You just stay in LA and don't go anywhere. Chen Zhao's face was filled with displeasure. He wanted to kill this old bastard when he got back. That sect is called Lian Shinzong. What's that? Chen Zhao couldn't understand West's authentic American pinyin translation. It's the sect that refined God spirits, the God refinement sect. West tried his best to straighten his tongue and repeated himself. He also added his understanding. To be able to refine even a God spirit, this sect was pretty amazing. West had been scared by the name of the alchemy sect back then. He felt that it must be very powerful. Oh, it's the alchemy sect, right? Chen Zhao roughly understood. I'll find Zhang Tianyi to understand the situation first. I'll contact you if there's any news. Okay, West said hurriedly. It's best if Celestial Master Zhang can help. If Celestial Master Zhang could intervene, at least the girl's chances of survival would be very high. Hey, old Zhang, tell me, what do you need me to do? What's with your attitude? You cried and begged me. Now that it's over, you're going to turn against me? You're acting like a big shot in front of me? Huh. You have to have the attitude to ask for help. I wasn't arrogant in front of you back then, right? You must have something to ask of me. I'm not begging you. I'm planning to buy a few shops in the town at the foot of Dragon Tiger Mountain and clean up the scammers there. Can you give me some advice? Zhang Tianyi's face twitched. That's a special scenic area. Do you think you can buy it with money? You really can buy it with money. I'll call my assistant now and contact the local government. I'll invest $100 million. If $100 million isn't enough, I'll invest $1 billion. If $1 billion isn't enough, I'll invest $10 billion. In the future, I'll only accept Dragon Tiger Mountain Taoists. I'll treat them well and fiercely. Chase away all the Taoists from other places. Fuck, just say it. How can you be like this? You don't need me to beg you. I'm joking with you. Actually, I'm joking with you too. Okay, say it. What do you want? Do you know if there's anyone in the spiritual world who wants to harm me or my family? Zhang Tianyi shuddered violently. Chen Zhao, you're not joking with me, right? What do you think? I've never heard of this. Is it Zhang Ding's trusted aide? I had a feud with him in China. Did you forget the killer organization you wiped out? You mean the killer organization? Ha! No. Are you messing with me? I'm just reminding you that even though you killed the leader of the killer organization, there are still some who escaped. Then how can you be sure that it's not someone from the killer organization who wants to take revenge on me? How much do you think they love their organization? How much loyalty do you think they have? If you destroy the assassin organization, they can just change to another organization. If not, they can also change to another job. Is there a need to go against you? So you're sure it's not the killer organization? In other words, it's Zhang Ding who wants to harm me and my family. Chapter 2755. Actually, I don't think it's Zhang Ding. Why not? I think it's his doing. I didn't kill him last time and only disabled him. Looks like I'm too soft-hearted. Hearing that, Zhang Tianyi only wanted to chuckle. Soft-hearted? Spare his life? If that's the case, you might as well kill him. The entire Mao Mountain would thank your family. After all, if Zhang Ding died, they could also announce to the world that Zhang Daojun had passed away due to his illness. But now, Zhang Ding only had his neck left. He couldn't even speak properly. The entire Mao Mountain was in an awkward situation. They could say that Zhang Ding was dead, but he was alive and well. They could avenge Zhang Ding, but no one responded. They could forget about Kunlun and Dragon Tiger Mountain. Even their own elders didn't support it. They couldn't beat them. It would be suicide if the old and the young attacked together. Moreover, the Mao Mountain wasn't peaceful either. A few sneaky people wanted to take advantage of the situation. They also wanted to be Daojun. The current Zhang Ding was a loner, not to mention taking revenge for him. It was only because the Maoshan sect was merciful that they did not kill him. It couldn't be said that Zhang Ding couldn't be killed. It could only be said that it was infinitely close to zero. His neck is the only thing he can move now. How do you expect him to take revenge on you? Bite you to death with his mouth? He can't move. He must have an accomplice, right? He must have a trusted aide, right? He does have a son. Do you want to kill him? I can give you the address. Sure. I think it's most likely his son. Yes, his son is in the 3rd class of Spring Thunder Kindergarten. His name is Zhang Mingshun. He's 5 years old. Remember to tell me when you succeed. Going to a kindergarten to seek revenge? Was he tired of living? Are there any more reliable suspects? For example, Zhang Ding's sweetheart who loves him to death. After knowing what happened to him, she won't let me live under the same sky as her. His wife died a long time ago. He did have a few mistresses outside, but they were all one-night stands. He only had one offspring, so there is no suspect like you're hoping for. Accomplice? Trusted aide? He was completely paralyzed by you, and his forces have vanished along with him. In other words, it's not him. He's just trying to stir up some trouble. Do you think the entire Maoshan sect would agree to it? He's currently being held captive by the people of the Maoshan sect. The only reason he's still alive is because he still has value in being alive, not because of his identity, and certainly not because they want him to cause more trouble for the Maoshan sect. All right, do you know the God Refining sect? God Refining sect? Wasn't that a 3rd or 4th-rate sect? I have some impression of it. Yo, Grand Celestial Master Zhang, you still have an impression of a 3rd or 4th-rate sect. You really have a photographic memory. I remember the Refining God sect because of the previous battle of Holy Glory. The Refining God sect had participated once, and they were also active in the big event 20 years ago. However, the Refining God sect expert who was active in the big event killed a Demon Clan expert in a battle. Including him, the 28 cultivators who died in the battle, I was the one who recited the eulogy, so I have some impression. Zhang Tianyi paused and suddenly said, "You're not suspecting that the Refining God sect has something to do with the surveillance of your wife and son, are you? The Refining God sect only has a few dozen disciples, and there isn't a single first-rate expert among them. I don't think they would get involved. Even if their subordinates dared to, their sect master wouldn't agree." Oh, why wouldn't they agree? Chen Zhao didn't think that way at first, but he read another meaning in Zhang Tianyi's words. He didn't just have an impression of the Refining God sect. The fact that he could be so sure that the refining God sect wouldn't cause trouble for him seemed to be a judgment made from a different perspective. Their sect master, Li Daming, is said to have been a farmer in his early years. He has a mellow personality, but of course, in layman's terms, he's honest and timid. The refining God sect doesn't have many capable people, and the only one who looked good died 20 years ago. Therefore, the refining God sect has always maintained a low profile. Do you know how low profile they are? How low profile? Once, a disciple of their sect caught a human trafficker and beat the human trafficker until he was crippled. In the end, Li Daming actually asked the disciple to turn himself into the police station. In the end, the police were reasonable and didn't file a case. They even gave the disciple a banner for bravery. When I first heard this name, I didn't think it was a righteous sect. Even if it wasn't a big villain sect, it was at least a lowly one. Why do I feel that the refining God sect master is a little too afraid of trouble? The only thing that's famous about them is the name of their sect. Anyone could be targeting you, except for the refining God sect. It's impossible even if Li Daming ate a bear's heart and leopard's gall. All right, I've never suspected that the refining God sect is targeting me and my family. Then why are you asking about the refining God sect? How do you know about the refining God sect that's hiding in this corner? There seems to be a change in the immortal refinement sect. The low-key and extraordinary Li Daming that you mentioned was killed by someone. Now his daughter is also being hunted. I was asked by someone to lend a helping hand and help his daughter. Is that so? Zhang Tianyi only frowned slightly. To him, this was a small matter that didn't matter. There were hundreds of such incidents in the Huaxia spiritual world every year. There was nothing to be surprised about, not to mention a small sect like the refining God sect. Even a sacred Taoist sect like the Three Mountains had gone through a few changes of orthodoxy. Zhang Tianyi only felt that it was a pity that the good guy in the spiritual world was gone just like that. So what do you mean? Help me find the suspect and find out where Li Daming's daughter is. It's best if you can tell her to come find me. That way, I won't have to look for her. All right, I've met Li Daming once. If it's convenient, I'll help. Zhang Tianyi's attitude was similar to Chen Zhao's. If it's convenient, if there's nothing else, hurry up and scram. You're a scourge if you stay in the country. *T. When you begged me to come back as soon as possible. Now that I've used it, you're giving me a cold shoulder? You've helped me a lot, but you've also caused a lot of trouble. Besides, did you go to the Dragon Tiger Mountains Heavenly Master Sect's library for free? Even if it's a brothel, you still have to pay. I'll let you eat there for free for 3 days and 3 nights. Isn't that enough? Next time you come to America, I'll find you an equal opponent. Then, I'll invite you to the headquarters of the Supernatural Organization for a day tour. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. Chapter 2756. Chen Zhao wanted to go home as soon as possible. However, his family was being watched. Chen Zhao couldn't guarantee that the person wouldn't come after him even if he returned home. After all, most cultivators didn't feel guilty about causing trouble in North America. So, it was understandable if the cultivator came to North America to cause trouble. Moreover, once he went to North America, the cultivator or force watching him might be even more unscrupulous. After all, if they caused trouble in China, they might be invited for tea by the relevant departments. But in North America, Chen Zhao was the relevant department. After hanging up Zhang Tianyi's call, Chen Zhao thought about how to find the mastermind. He couldn't think of a way no matter how hard he thought. But he suddenly thought of Imo Han. Yes, professional work should be handled by professionals. Chen Zhao immediately called Imo Han. Old Imo, where are you? I'm still in Shanghai. Boss, what's up? My wife suspects that she and the child are being watched. How do we find out who's watching us? Imo Han thought about it. He didn't ask if they were really being watched or if it was an illusion. For cultivators, as long as there was a suspicion, it was confirmed. Regardless of whether they were being watched or not, they had to find out who it was. Boss, you can tell your employees that you're going back to Los Angeles tomorrow. Huh? You're suspecting my employees? Since the other party wants to deal with you, they'll naturally investigate your information, and it's not difficult to investigate your information in China. The other party is likely to obtain some of your information through your company's employees. So, boss, as long as you tell your employees that you're returning to Los Angeles tomorrow, the other party will definitely take action first. Are you sure they'll act first, instead of waiting until we get to Los Angeles? It's the same in North America. Black-haired and black-eyed people are more likely to attract attention. There's an iron rule in the assassin world. Try not to go to other races to carry out missions. That's why the top assassin in Africa is a black man, the top assassin in Europe and the United States is a white man, and the top assassin in Asia is an Asian man. That's because the region has limited the isolation of the assassin industry. And Mohan paused for a moment, then said, moreover, if they rashly go to North America, it will be very difficult for them to get supplies there, and it will be very easy for them to expose their whereabouts. So, before you stay in China or on the plane, this is undoubtedly the best choice. Zhang Ting, inform my employees that I'm going back to Los Angeles tomorrow. We'll have dinner tonight. Boss, don't you have a flight in 2 days? Something cropped up, so I had to bring it forward. All right, I'll inform the staff. Zhang Ting didn't like Chen Zhao's crazy way of doing things. It could be said that he already had a certain level of immunity. Chen Zhao often went crazy when people came to him, but every time it was harmless and insignificant. So, Zhang Ting quite liked Chen Zhao as a boss. That night, Chen Zhao held a big banquet. They ate and drank. The guests and the host enjoyed themselves to the fullest. After sending the employees of the animation company out of the hotel, Chen Zhao vaguely fell a gaze on him. It was very subtle, but it couldn't escape Chen Zhao's senses. However, Chen Zhao could only sense it. He couldn't find any traces of the person. The person probably wasn't monitoring him with his eyes. Chen Zhao analyzed in his mind. Chen Zhao returned to the hotel expressionlessly. The gaze also disappeared. This meant that the person was outside the hotel. It probably wasn't a surveillance device. It should be some kind of spell that could avoid Chen Zhao's shadow vision. However, it was also clear that the person was very powerful. At least in terms of surveillance, the person was definitely unparalleled. After Chen Zhao returned to the hotel, a blurry figure moved through the streets under the night sky. After a few turns, it disappeared into the city. Whoosh! A cool breeze whistled through the wilderness. The cool breeze brushed past a few figures. If Chen Zhao was here, he would realize that one of them was Chen Zhao, whom he'd met once before. The person who sent the message is back. Yes, he's back. He's planning to leave tomorrow and go back to America. He's leaving tomorrow. Zhou Yinan's expression changed. No, we have to act quickly. We'll do it tonight. No, we can't do it tonight. The other person immediately rejected Zhou Yinan's request. This person was one-eyed. His hair was messy and he wore loose clothes. However, his single eye flashed with a dangerous light. That's the city. If we attack there and can't subdue him instantly, we won't be able to escape the subsequent pursuit no matter how powerful we are, the one-eyed person said. We definitely can't do it in the city. Then he's leaving tomorrow. Do we have to chase him to America? Zhou Yinan said, unwilling to give up. No need for that. We can do it on the way to the airport. After all, most of the roads to the airport were in the suburbs. As long as they made proper arrangements, they could still find a chance. Remember, Zhou Yinan said solemnly, we can't fight him head-on. It's best if we can use his wife and children as a threat. After they parted at Hanwang Mountain, he didn't believe Wang Hai and Li Ke's words. Later, he suddenly heard that Zhang Ding was seriously injured for no reason and then resigned from his position as Dao Lord and sect leader. He asked around and found out that it was Zhang Ding who had caused trouble outside. His enemies had even gone to the Mao Mountain Gate. The enemy had managed to escape unscathed. It was said that the enemy's surname was Chun. Zhou Yinan had been scared out of his wits, but he still remembered Chen Zhao. After all, that matter was too important to him. He had to take the risk. Fortunately, the people he found were all from the Five Elements sect. 2 of them were even from the Five Elements sect's inner sect. Not only were they powerful, but they also had extraordinary identities. They were many times more powerful than outer sect disciples like Zhou Nan. Moreover, they didn't know the identity of the person they were dealing with. They only heard that Chun Zhao was rich. Under Zhou Nan's encouragement, they joined in. Zhou Nan had reminded them many times. Chun Zhao's cultivation was unfathomable, but he purposely hid the fact that Chun Zhao had once caused a ruckus in the Mao Mountain intersect. That incident had caused a huge ruckus in Mao Mountain. Therefore, the impression they had was that Chun Zhao had some cultivation. He was the kind of person who wasn't as strong as the strong, but was better than the weak. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.